Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was sent to Fairy Tail and got married to Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Stranger in the Scarlet Sunset. The world ended in silence. Not the glorious, roaring silence of a hard-won victory, but the hollow, breathless quiet of a graveyard. Ash, fine as powdered bone, drift. On a wind that had forgotten how to howl. The sky was a bruised and weeping gray, choked with the dust of gods and mountains. Naruto Uzumaki stood in the ruin of what was once the Valley of the End. The great statues of Hashirama and Madara now little more than shattered teeth jutting from the earth. He could still feel the phantom echo of his final Rasengan against Sasuke's Chidori, a clash that had not broken their bond but finally, miraculously, mended it. Sasuke was a short distance away, propped against a shard of granite, one arm missing, the other limp at his side. Naruto was in a similar state, his own right arm a tattered memory below the elbow. They were exhausted, broken, but they were alive. They had won. Kagaya was sealed. The infinite Tsukuyomi was broken. The war was over. A strange, numbing peace settled over Naruto. It was the feeling of a runner who had sprinted for a lifetime and could finally stop. He took a deep breath, the air thick with the taste of stone and ozone. He could feel the life force of everyone on the planet, weak and flickering, but returning. He had done it. Naruto. Sasuke's voice was a dry rasp, but it held a clarity Naruto hadn't heard since they were children. There was no anger, no hatred. Only a profound, weary acceptance. We're going home, Sasuke, Naruto said, a smile cracking the grime on his face. It was a real smile, wide and true. He felt Kurama stir within him, a low, rumbling purr of exhausted contentment. It's over, Kit, the great fox murmured, his voice a gravelly comfort in the vast emptiness of Naruto's mindscape. You actually did it. Naruto's smile widened. We did it. It was in that moment of pure, unadulterated relief that the world tore itself apart. A sliver of absolute blackness, no thicker than a hair, peeled away from the shadow of a nearby rock. It moved without sound, an oily, sentient patch of night that oozed toward him. Naruto's senses, honed by the sage's power and a lifetime of war, reamed a warning a fraction of a second too late. Black Zetsu, a remnant, a dying, hateful echo. If I cannot have this world, the creature whispered, its voice like grinding glass, then you cannot have your victory. It didn't lunge to kill. It did something worse. It slammed a formless limb against Naruto's chest, and the technique it unleashed was not of this world. It was a forbidden jutsu born from Kagaya's dimensional travels. A thing of pure cosmic spite. Not a tool of transport, but of erasure. Reality fractured. The gray sky cracked like a mirror, revealing a chaotic maelstrom of screaming, impossible colors. The very fabric of space groaned, torn asunder. Naruto felt a pull that was absolute, a force that was not moving his body but unmaking his existence, atom by atom. He tried to anchor himself, to pour six paths chakra into the ground, but there was no ground to hold onto. He was being pulled out of the world, out of its timeline, out of its memory. Naruto. Sasuke's scream was sharp, terrified. He pushed himself up, his one remaining arm reaching, but he was already fading from Naruto's sight. Naruto's fingers brushed against the swirling vortex. He saw Kurama's chakra being siphoned away, not into Zetsu, but into the chaotic tier. He saw his own life, his friends, his village, every bond, every memory, stretching thin, like a thread about to snap. His last sigh, of his world was Sasuke Uchiha's horrified face, his Sharingan and Rinnegan wide with a desperate, helpless panic. Then, with a sound like the universe itself screaming, he was gone. The fall was an eternity of sensory overload. He tumbled through voids of silent black and novas of blinding white. He felt the crushing pressure of 1,000 oceans and the freezing vacuum of dead space. The very concept of up and down ceased to exist. Kurama roared in his mind, not in anger, but in a desperate attempt to shield his soul, their combined chakra forming a golden shell against the dimensional shear. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. He burst through a ceiling of roiling gray clouds and plummeted toward a world that felt fundamentally wrong. Rain, thick and heavy, lashed at him. The air was cool and tasted of salt and wet earth. But the energy, his sage mode was still active, a desperate instinct, and it recoiled from the atmosphere. This world was not suffused with the calm, steady flow of natural energy. It was saturated with something else, something glittering and wild and chaotic. It felt like a billion tiny, chattering particles of light, a stark contrast to the deep, resonant river of life he was used to. He was falling fast, a meteor in an orange jumpsuit. Below him, a town sprawled around a winding river, its buildings a charming mix of stone and timber. A great cat, headral with a towering clock tower, stood at its center. He was no longer being erased, but his control was shot. He was just a body in freefall. Kurama's power surged, stabilizing him just enough to kill his momentum. He hit the cobblestone street of a deserted alleyway with a jarring impact that would have shattered a normal man, but only sent a deep ache through his bones. He landed on one knee, his head bowed, rain plastering his blonde hair to his forehead. He was alive, he was solid, he pushed himself to his feet, swaying. The rain was cold, the alley was dark, he looked at his hands. They were his. He could feel the rough calluses, the sealed stump where his prosthetic arm would one day be. He was real, but the connection, it was gone. He reached out with his senses, pushing them further and further. Desperately searching for the familiar chakra signatures of his friends. Sakura, Kakashi, Hinata, Sasuke, nothing. He could feel the life in this new world, the strange, glittering energy of its people, but his own world. His own people were a blank, silent void. It was as if he was screaming into a room where everyone had vanished. Zetsu hadn't just sent him away. He had severed him. A profound, soul-crushing loneliness washed over him, so immense it almost brought him to his knees. He was a ghost, a stranger in a world that wasn't his, a leaf torn from its tree and thrown into a different ocean. The weight of his victory was gone, replaced by the crushing weight of his loss. A deep, groaning sound, like the moan of a dying giant, cut through his despair. It was the shriek of stressed stone and splintering wood. He looked up. The storm was worsening, a furious gale whipping through the town. A bolt of lightning, stark white and vicious, struck the top of the central clock tower. The ancient stone cracked. With a deafening roar, the entire top belfry began to shear away, tilting precariously over the main town square where a small group of people, men, women, children, were huddled under an awning. Staring up in frozen terror. Naruto didn't think. He didn't weigh the options or consider the consequences of revealing himself. He just moved. His grief, his loss, his confusion, it all vanished. Burned away by a singular, protective instinct that was as much a part of him as his own heartbeat. He blurred out of the alley, a flash of orange in the gray deluge. 6 massive arms, formed of pure, golden chakra, erupted from his back. They were ethereal, glowing with an inner light, and they stretched with impossible speed, crossing the 50 meters to the tower in a heartbeat. 3 of the arms wrapped around the crumbling belfry, their grip immense but gentle, halting its descent. The other 3 flattened into a wide, shimmering shield above the terrified civilians, catching a shower of stone and debris that would have crushed them. Silence descended upon the square, broken only by the hiss of the rain and the collective gasp of the people below. They stared, wide-eyed, not at the saved tower, but at the lone figure standing in the middle of the square. A young man in a tattered orange and black outfit, rain soaking him to the bone, with 6 arms of pure, condensed sunlight holding their world together. He just stood there, his expression unreadable, the wind whipping his blonde hair around his face. The moment stretched, suspended in disbelief. Then, the sound of running footsteps approached. Everyone, get back. What in blazes? A short, elderly man in a strange jester-like outfit ran into the square, his eyes wide with shock. He was flanked by 2 women. One was tall and imposing, clad in steel armor, with a cascade of scarlet hair that was a defiant slash of color against the storm's gloom. Her hand was already on the hilt of the sword at her hip. Her posture a perfect balance of readiness and caution. The other woman was her opposite. She wore a simple, elegant dress, now soaked through, and her long, white hair framed a face of impossible beauty. But her smile, usually a beacon of warmth for her guild, was gone. Her eyes, a deep, knowing blue, were fixed on Naruto, and they held not fear, but a startling, profound curiosity. She saw past the spectacle of the golden arms. She saw the solitary figure at the center of it all, the immense power radiating from him like heat from a sun, and the bone-deep exhaustion that clung to him like a shroud. Erza Scarlet, Mirajane Strauss, and their master, Makarov Dreyar, had come to investigate the disturbance. They found something far beyond their understanding. Naruto's chakra RMS gently lowered the broken belfry to the ground, the tons of stone settling with a soft thud that spoke of absolute control. The arms then dissolved back into him, fading like morning mist. He stood his ground, his senses on high alert. These newcomers were strong. The energy, the magic, rolling off them was dense and powerful. The armored woman was a fortress of contained force. The white hair, Ed1 was a placid sea with a leviathan sleeping in its depths. The old man was an ocean, his power vast and deep. "Who are you, son?" Makarov asked, his voice steady despite the incredible display he had just witnessed. He took a cautious step forward. What was that power? I've never seen magic like it. Naruto's gaze flickered between the three of them. His throat was dry. He hadn't spoken to anyone in this new reality. "It wasn't magic," he said, his voice quiet but clear, carrying easily over the storm. Erza's eyes narrowed. "Then what was it? You're radiating an energy I can't comprehend. Are you a threat to Magnolia?" Her tone wasn't accusatory, but it was direct, demanding. A warrior assessing a potential foe. Naruto met her gaze. He saw no malice in her, only a fierce, protective resolve. It was a look he knew well. He'd seen it in his own mirror. He gave a slight shake of his head. No, it was Mirajane who broke the tense standoff. She took a step past Erza, her movements fluid and calm. She stopped a few feet from him, her blue eyes soft with a sympathy that caught him completely off guard. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice gentle. "You look lost." Her question, so simple and so painfully accurate, pierced through his guard. He wasn't a threat. He wasn't a monster. He was just lost. The word echoed in the desolate chambers of his heart. His shoulders, which had been squared and ready for a fight, slumped ever so slightly. The tension in the air dissipated, replaced by a fragile, uncertain curiosity. Before anyone could speak again, a thunderous explosion ripped through a district on the edge of town. A plume of black smoke and angry red fire erupted into the sky, stark against the gray clouds. Screams followed, sharp and terrified. Erza spun around, her expression hardening. "A dark guild, quote, looks like it," Makarov grunted, his gaze turning grim. "Eisenwald cowards. Probably a splinter cell thinking they can make a name for themselves while the council is in disarray." He turned back to Naruto. "We have to go. Our town needs us. You, stay here for now. We'll sort this out when we get back." They began to run, but Naruto didn't stay put. He heard the screams. He saw the fire. It was the language of his entire life. Innocents were in danger. His own pain, his own loss, was irrelevant. He was moving before he made a conscious decision, a blue R of orange that easily kept pace with the two S-class mages. Erza shot him a surprised look. "Our fight, not yours. People are screaming," Naruto stated simply, as if that explained everything. And to him, it did. A flicker of respect shone in Erza's eyes. She gave a curt nod. "Then keep up." They arrived at the merchant district to find chaos. A dozen mages in grim, tattered cloaks were laying waste to the street. They wielded a strange, corrosive magic, flinging orbs of purplish energy that ate through stone and wood. They weren't just attacking. They were testing something. At their center, a lanky man with a cruel sneer held a pulsating crystal, the source of their power. "Fairy tale," the leader snarled. "Just the guinea pigs we needed. Witness the power of void lacrima. Mirajane, get the civilians clear," Erza commanded, her body glowing with a golden light. In a flash, her casual armor was replaced by her heaven's wheel set, dozens of swords materializing in the air behind her. "Makarov-sama, the leader is yours." Quote, "Gladly." The master boomed, his body already beginning to swell in size. The battle was joined. Erza was a whirlwind of steel, her swords dancing through the air, intercepting spells. and forcing the dark mages back. Mirajane, moving with a grace that belied her power, became a blur of white and blue, disabling foes with precise strikes and ushering panicked shopkeepers to safety. Naruto watched for a single, analytical second. He saw their patterns, their strengths, the enemy's formation. Then he entered the fray. He didn't power up. He didn't use his more devastating techniques. He didn't need to. He created 24 shadow clones. The dark mages, focused on the two powerful women, were caught completely off guard as identical copies of the strange blonde man appeared in their midst. The clones moved with a unified, terrifying purpose. They didn't use grand spells. They used pure, unadulterated taijutsu. A jab to the throat here, a sweep of the legs there. They flowed like water around the mages, clumsy defenses, their movements economical and brutally efficient. An enemy would raise his hands to cast a spell, only for a clone to appear behind him, tapping him on the neck and sending him slumping to the ground, unconscious. Erza, in the middle of launching a volley of swords, paused for a fraction of a second, her eyes wide. She was accustomed to Natsu's brawling and Gray's static creations. This was different. This was tactics. This was the art of war distilled into one man and his living echoes. The real Naruto moved through the chaos, a phantom. He saw a blast of the corrosive void magic heading toward a cornered Erza, who was occupied with 3 mages at once. She saw it coming, her eyes widening as she realized she couldn't re-equip her adamantine armor in time. She braced for the impact. It never came. A flash of orange appeared in front of her. Naruto stood there, his back to her, one hand raised. A small, transparent sphere of wind, no bigger than his palm, spun into existence. It wasn't a Rasengan, not quite. It was a simple, controlled burst of wind-natured chakra. The purple orb of void magic slammed into it and simply vanished. Atomized, dissipated into nothingness. He didn't even look back at her. He just tilted his head slightly. "You're open on your left." Then he was gone, a blur of motion toward the next trouble spot. Erza stared at the spot where he had stood, her heart hammering in her chest. The casualness of it, the sheer, overwhelming level of power required to so effortlessly nullify an attack that could melt steel. It was a level of mastery she had only ever dreamed of. She looked at him, now engaging a mage with a flurry of kicks and punches that were too fast for the eye to properly follow, and a deep, profound respect. The kind a true warrior feels for a grandmaster, began to bloom in her chest. Meanwhile, Makarov, now in his giant form, was facing the leader. The man was cackling, holding the void lacrima aloft. "Your magic is nothing, old man. The promise of silence is absolute. The world will be cleansed of its noisy, chaotic energy." Silence. Cleansed. The word snagged in Naruto's mind. A chilling echo of the Akatsuki's rhetoric. He glanced at the lacrima. The energy it was putting out felt foul, empty. It wasn't just destructive. It felt like anti-life. Makarov's giant fist swung down. But the leader held up the lacrima, and a shield of purple void energy flared to life, absorbing the blow. Makarov grunted, his attack completely nullified. "See, futile," the man shrieked. "He's drawing power from his allies," Naruto's voice said, suddenly right beside Makarov's giant ear. The guild master turned to see Naruto standing on his shoulder, his arms crossed. His power increases the more of them are conscious. Then we'll just have to put them all to sleep." Makarov roared. "Already on it," Naruto said. On the street below, the last of his clones finished their work. The dark mages were all down, unconscious but unharmed, tied up with their own belts. The flow of energy to the leader was cut. The man's eyes widened in panic as the power in his lacrima guttered. He looked up at the giant guild master and the blonde man on his shoulder. "No, this isn't." Makarov's fist swung again. This time, there was no shield. The battle was over. The rain began to soften. The gray clouds thinning to reveal the first hints of a setting sun. The sky was painted in magnificent strokes of orange, red, and gold. The town guard was cleaning up the mess, and the GWE members were making sure everyone was all right. Naruto stood apart from them, near the edge of the river that flowed through town. He stared at the scarlet sunset, a color so achingly familiar it felt like a knife in his heart. He remembered watching sunsets like this from the top of the Hokage monument, dreaming of the day his face would be carved there. A world away, an eternity ago, the adrenaline of the fight had faded, and the cold, crushing loneliness returned, heavier than before. That was incredible. He turned. Mirajane was walking toward him, holding 2 mugs of what looked like hot cider. She offered one to him, her smile gentle and genuine. "You fight like a dancer and a general all at once," she said, her voice soft. "Thank you for helping us." He accepted the mug, the warmth seeping into his cold hands. "They were hurting people," he said, his gaze returning to the horizon. She stood beside him, following his gaze. They were quiet for a long moment, simply watching the colors bleed across the sky. Unlike Erza, she didn't ask about his power. Unlike Makarov, she didn't ask where he came from. "You're looking for home, aren't you?" she asked quietly. His breath hitched. He didn't answer, but his knuckles whitened around the mug. Mirajane's gaze softened with an empathy that was almost overwhelming. "I can feel it, you know. Not just your strength. There's something else there. A great power, and a great sorrow." She hesitated for a moment, then continued, her voice barely a whisper. "It feels a little like the power I keep locked away inside myself. A part of you that you can't get rid of, that others might see as a demon." Naruto's head snapped toward her, his eyes wide with shock. How could she? She's a perceptive one, Kit, Kurama rumbled in his mind. She doesn't just see the power. She sees the cage. Mirajane met his stunned gaze without flinching. "You don't have to carry it alone here," she said, her words a simple, heartfelt promise. "In fairy tale, we're all a little broken. We're all carrying something. That's what makes us family." Her understanding, her immediate acceptance of the monstrous power he'd spent his entire life trying to control, was a balm on a wound he didn't even know was still bleeding. A warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the cider. It was hope, a tiny, fragile flicker of it. Later, they oohed in the main hall of the Fairy Tale Guild. It was absolute, glorious chaos. Tables were being smashed in a brawl between a shirtless young man who radiated an aura of cold and a pink-haired youth who seemed to be perpetually on fire. A woman in a bikini top sat at the bar, downing an entire barrel of ale by herself. Music blared from a corner. People were laughing, shouting, and fighting with the casual intimacy of siblings. It was loud, it was messy, it was alive, and it reminded him so much of the best days of Team 7 that his heart ached. Makarov, back to his normal size, stood before him. Erza was nearby, her armor gone, replaced by a simple blouse and skirt. She watched him with an intense, unreadable expression. Mirajane was behind the bar, polishing a glass, but her eyes kept drifting toward him, a small, encouraging smile on her face. "You saved a lot of people today, son," Makarov said, his voice serious. "You have power unlike any I have ever seen, and you used it to protect others without a moment's hesitation. That is the mark of a true mage, regardless of what you call your power." He gestured to the chaotic hall. "This is our home. We're a little rough around the edges. We break things. We get into trouble with the Magic Council more often than not. But we are a family. And we always have room for one more." He held up a stamp, the iconic symbol of the guild inked on its surface. "We don't have all the answers. We don't know where you came from, and you don't have to tell us until you're ready. But what we can offer you is this, a place to belong. A place to call home until you find your way back to your own. Or, until you decide to make this one yours." Naruto looked from the stamp to the guild hall. He saw the brawling boys, the drinking woman, the laughter, the joy, the life. He saw Erza, the stoic warrior, whose gaze held a newfound respect that felt as solid as steel. He saw Mirajane, the gentle soul, who had looked at the monster within him and offered not fear, but kinship. He had lost his home. He had lost his world. He could spend the rest of his existence, however long that might be, searching for a way back to a place that might no longer be reachable. Or he could start again. He thought of Jiraiya's final words, of the endless cycle of hatred. Maybe his story wasn't over. Maybe this was just the next chapter. A new home wasn't a betrayal of the old one. It was a way to keep its memory alive, to keep fighting for the things it represented. He slowly, deliberately, held out his left arm, the one that was whole. But he kept his palm down. presenting the back of his hand. On it, faintly visible under his skin, were the intricate seal markings that anchored his future prosthetic. A reminder of a promise, a connection to Sasuke, a scar from his past. "Here," he said, his voice steady. Makarov smiled, a wide, knowing grin. He pressed the stamp firmly onto Naruto's hand, right over the faint lines of the seal. The black ink of the fairy tale emblem stood out starkly against his skin. A new bond, layered over an old one. Not erasing it, but adding to it. He looked up, and for the first time since he'd arrived in this strange, new world, Naruto Uzumaki allowed himself a small, genuine smile. The noise of the guild hall swelled around him, no longer just chaos, but the sound of a family. The sound of a home. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Island of Cursed Moonlight. A few weeks drifted by in a comfortable, chaotic haze. Naruto learned that life in the fairy tale guild hall was a symphony of beautiful madness. It began a morning with the low murmur of early risers and escalated by midday into a crescendo of brawls, laughter, and the occasional explosion. He found a strange peace in it. The constant, vibrant energy of the guild was the perfect antidote to the silent void that his own world had become in his senses. He didn't talk much about his past. No one pressed him. They saw the guild mark on his hand, the quiet way he carried himself, and the terrifying efficiency with which he could end a fight, and that was enough. He became a peculiar sort of fixture. Sometimes he'd be seen meditating in a corner, so still he seemed carved from stone. A faint golden aura flickering around him. Other times, he'd use a simple transformation jutsu to fix a roof broken by Natsu or repair a table shattered by an errant kick from Gray. He never asked for jewels, only for a bowl of ramen from Mirajane, a request she always met with a radiant smile and a bowl twice the size of anyone else's. He trained. Every morning before the sun rose, he would be in the forest outside Magnolia, moving through katas with a fluid precision that seemed to bend the air around him. He ran through his jutsu, keeping them sharp, but his focus was on control. In this world, with its fragile buildings and people not hardened by constant war, his full power was a cataclysm waiting to happen. The Rasenshuriken that could level a forest was a liability here. He practiced shaping his chakra into smaller, more precise forms, a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer. "You are holding back, Kit," Kurama grumbled one morning, his voice a familiar earthquake in Naruto's mind. They were in their shared mindscape, the vast, open field that had long ago replaced the dark, caged sewer. "This world is soft. You could be its king." Naruto sat cross-legged, facing the colossal fox. "I didn't want to be a king in my own world, Kurama. I'm not going to start now. This is their home. We're just guests. Guests who saved them twice," the fox snorted, a plume of hot air ruffling the grass. "The scarlet-haired woman respects your power. The white-haired one understands your burden. They are strong, worthy." Naruto's lips twitched into a small smile. "They're good people. HMPH. See that you remember who you are. You are Naruto Uzumaki, the child of the prophecy, the savior of the shinobi world. Do not let this peace make you forget the wolf you have inside you." "I'm not the wolf," Naruto thought back, his resolve firm. "You are, and you're my partner. We keep each other in check." Kurama let out a low, rumbling chuckle, a sound of grudging respect. Indeed. Back in the guild hall, the day was proceeding as usual. Natsu Dragneel, the fire-breathing dragon slayer, stood proudly on a table, waving a piece of paper. "Listen up, everyone. I found the perfect job for us," he declared, his grin wide and feral. "It's S-class. The pay is 7 million jewels." This got everyone's attention. Gray Fullbuster, who had somehow already lost his shirt, vaulted over a bench to get a closer look. "S-class. You can't take an S-class quest, Flame Brain. You're not qualified. Says you, Ice Stripper. This one's a piece of cake. Cure a mysterious curse on Galuna Island. We can totally do that." Naruto, sitting at the bar sipping a glass of water, felt a strange prickle on his skin. He focused his senses on the quest board on the second floor, where the S-class requests were posted. Even from this distance, his sage mode could feel it. A faint, malevolent aura clung to that section of the board, a cold, dead energy that was completely alien to the lively chaos of the guild. It was the same stale, void-like energy he'd felt from the Eisenwald mage's lacrima. Erza, who had been quietly eating a slice of strawberry cake, stood up, her presence immediately commanding the room's attention. Natsu, you will do no such thing. The S-class quests are reserved for mages Master Makarov has deemed worthy. It is a sign of trust and a measure of responsibility. But Erza, Natsu whined, it's just a dumb curse. As Natsu argued, a pretty blonde girl with wide, brown eyes and a set of keys clipped to her belt entered the guild hall. She looked flustered, her notebook clutched to her chest. Hey, guys, sorry I'm late. I was just finishing the first chapter of my, oh, what's going on? This was Lucy Heartfilia, the guild's newest celestial mage. Naruto had seen her around, a bright, earnest presence who was still finding her footing. She looked at Naruto and gave a small, hesitant wave, which he returned with a nod and a small smile. He could say she was still a little intimidated by him. Most of the guild was. They had all seen what he did at the clock tower, had all heard the stories of how he'd single-handedly dismantled the Eisenwald splinter group. They saw him as a living legend, a quiet god of war who chose to live among them. It made him feel isolated, a monument rather than a person. The argument escalated until Makarov, perched on the bar, finally spoke. Natsu, Erza is right. Put the request back. Defeated, Natsu grumbled and stomped his way toward the stairs, but Naruto noticed the sly glint in his eye. He wasn't giving up, he was just being sneaky. A familiar pang of nostalgia hit Naruto. It was the exact same look he used to give Iruka-sensei before a particularly epic prank. Later that night, the guild was quiet. Naruto felt a flicker of movement from the second floor. Natsu. He was stealing the request. A moment later, Happy, the blue talking cat, flew down and whispered something to Lucy, who paled and shot out of the guild hall. Naruto sighed. He knew he should probably stop them, but a part of him, the part that was still a 16-year-old troublemaker, couldn't bring himself to do it. His senses, however, remained on edge. That cold energy from the request, it was a whisper of the same emptiness from the dark mage's weapon. A promise of silence. He couldn't ignore it. He found Erza by the river, staring at the moonlit water. Her scarlet hair like spilled wine in the dim light. He took it, didn't he? Naruto said, coming to a stop beside her. She didn't seem surprised by his presence. Yes, and he took Lucy with him. Gray went after them. I'm going to Harjan to retrieve them all. They are making a mockery of the guild's rules. It's more than that, Naruto said, his gaze distant. I felt something from that mission scroll. An energy that doesn't belong in this world. It's cold, dead. Erza turned to him, her expression serious. The same energy you mentioned from the Eisenwald attack. He nodded. I think something is happening on that island, something worse than a simple curse. I'm coming with you. Her eyes searched his for a moment. She saw no arrogance, just quiet certainty. She gave a single, sharp nod. Very well. Your power may be necessary. The journey to Harjan was an experience. They caught the last train, and Erza had brought along a mountain of luggage that Naruto, to her surprise, had sealed into a small scroll with a quick application of Fuinjutsu, earning a rare, impressed blink from the stoic knight. They found Natsu, Happy, and Lucy on the train, with Natsu already green in the face from motion sickness. Gray was there too, having caught up to them. The reunion was explosive. Erza's terrifying lecture was enough to make both Natsu and Gray, now shirtless and shivering, huddled together like frightened children. Lucy looked like she was about to faint from sheer terror. Naruto stayed back, letting Erza handle her teammates. He watched Lucy, who was trying to make herself as small as possible. When Erza's fury finally subsided into a simmering lecture, he approached the trembling celestial mage. You're Lucy, right? He asked, his voice calm. She jumped, her eyes wide. Why yes, Naruto-san, I'm so sorry. I tried to stop him, but Natsu is just so, Natsu. He chuckled, a low, warm sound. I know the type. He gestured to the set of golden keys at her hip. Those are your magical items. Oh, yes. Eager to change the subject, she unclipped them. They're celestial spirit gate keys. They let me summon spirits from the celestial world to help me fight. Partners, Naruto said, his eyes focused on the keys with genuine interest. Not tools. Lucy blinked, surprised. That's exactly what they are. How did you know? I had a partner who was sealed away for a long time. He said, his gaze distant. I learned that trust has to go both ways for a partnership to mean anything. He looked back at her, a sincere curiosity in his eyes. They must have incredible stories. No one had ever asked about her spirit's stories before. They asked about their powers, their fighting abilities. But Naruto had asked about them. A warm blush crept up her neck. This silent, overwhelmingly powerful man wasn't scary at all. He was gentle, kind. The rest of the journey was tense but uneventful. They had to hire a boat to take them to Galuna Island. A place the sailors spoke of in hushed, fearful tones. They said it was cursed, that the moon had been trapped in a perpetual state of eerie, purplish twilight, and that anyone who stayed on the land too long would be transformed into a monster. As they approached, Naruto stood at the prow of the boat, his eyes closed. The malevolent energy grew stronger, a discordant note in the world's natural harmony. It was a symphony of sickness. He could feel the twisted life force of the island's inhabitants, the pulsating thrum of a vast, sealed power under the ground, and the rhythmic, unnatural pulse of a massive ritual. The curse, Erza said, standing beside him. You can feel it. I can feel everything, Naruto murmured, opening his eyes. They were glowing faintly, the pupils slit like a cat's. He was in sage mode. The people on this island aren't cursed. They're just changing. A side effect of the magic being used here. The real curse is what's under our feet. He looked down, as if he could see through the boat. Through the ocean, through the very earth itself. Something immense. Something filled with hate. And it's being fed. They landed on a beach littered with strange, violet rocks. The village was a short walk away, a collection of ramshackle huts filled with people who looked disturbingly non-human. They had large, demonic arms and scaly patches of skin. But their eyes were filled with fear and despair. The village chief, a man more transformed than the others, explained the curse. He begged them to destroy the moon, believing it to be the source of their affliction. Natsu, ever direct, was ready to do just that, but Naruto placed a hand on his shoulder. The moon isn't the problem, he said, his gaze fixed on the violet-hued satellite. That's just a lens, a magical construct called the moon drip. It's focusing energy on something. That's what we need to find. Their investigation led them to ancient ruins deep within the island's jungle. And there, they found it. A temple, built around a colossal block of ice. Frozen within was a monster of nightmarish proportions, a horned beast of pure evil that radiated an aura of death and destruction. Deliora. And kneeling before it were 3 mages, chanting an incantation. At their center was a young man with white hair, his expression a mask of cold determination. Leon, Gray breathed, his voice tight with a mix of anger and shock. What are you doing? Leon Vascha, Gray's fellow student under their master, turned. His eyes showed no surprise, only cold disdain. Gray, I should have known Er's other disappointing pupil would show up. I'm finishing what she could not. I'm going to surpass her by destroying the beast she gave her life to seal. You're a fool, Gray shouted, already taking a fighting stance. The moon drip will melt the ice, but it will use up your life force to do it. You'll be reviving a demon that will destroy everything, and you'll die in the process. A worthy sacrifice to achieve my goal, Leon declared. Natsu, never one for conversation when a fight was on the table, ignited his fists. I don't get all this drama, but if you're the bad guy, I'm gonna kick your ass. He charged, but he never reached him. A blur of orange intercepted him. Naruto appeared between Natsu and Leon, his hand gripping Natsu's shoulder, halting him effortlessly. Wait, Natsu, Naruto said. His voice calm but firm. He wasn't looking at Natsu. His gaze was fixed on Leon. And who are you? Leon sneered. Another of fairy tale's children. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. He took a step forward. His presence utterly serene. He wasn't radiating killing intent. He was radiating a profound, sorrowful understanding. You want to surpass your master. The woman who gave her life for you. She gave her life because she was weak. Leon spat. I will show the world the true power of her ice-make magic by achieving what she could not. You think killing a mindless beast proves your strength? Naruto's voice was still quiet, but it cut through the temple's cavernous space. You think that will honor her memory? He took another step. I once chased a friend for years. A brother. He was consumed by a quest for power, to avenge the death of his family. He thought that by achieving his goal, he would find peace. But all he found was more emptiness. He was talking about Sasuke. The raw honesty in his voice made everyone, Natsu, Gray, even Erza, fall silent. Your master didn't seal Deliora because she was weak, Leon, Naruto continued, his sage eyes boring into the young ice mage. She sealed it to protect you. To protect Gray. To protect the future. Her legacy isn't a dead demon. It's you, her students. And you are spitting on that legacy by throwing your life away for a pointless obsession. Leon flinched, a flicker of doubt crossing his face for the first time. You know nothing. I know what it's like to be alone, Naruto said softly. I know what it's like to chase a ghost. This path, it won't bring you glory. It will just bring you more pain. And it will make her sacrifice meaningless. The power of Naruto's words, born from a lifetime of pain and reconciliation, struck Leon harder than any physical blow could. His resolve wavered, his conviction cracking under the weight of Naruto's profound empathy. It was in that moment of hesitation that a new voice spoke. Cool and condescending, echoing from the shadows of the temple. A fascinating sentiment, utterly illogical, but fascinating. A figure stepped out of the darkness. He was tall and slender, dressed in immaculate white robes that seemed to repel the dust and grime of the ruins. He wore thin spectacles, and his hair was the color of old parchment. He held a large, leather-bound book in one hand. His magical signature was unnervingly clean, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the cold, empty energy Naruto had been sensing all along. The bond between student and master is merely a chemical and psychological imprinting, the man said, pushing his glasses up his nose. To attribute such cosmic significance to it is an emotional fallacy. He glanced at the wavering Leon with open contempt. And you were merely a tool to gather data. Your emotional instability has compromised the experiment. You are dismissed. Leon stared, confused. Who are you? You're the one who gave me the ancient texts for the moon drip. I am a humble collector, the man said, his eyes flicking from the ice to Naruto. And this specimen, he gestured to Deliora, possesses a unique energy signature. A confluence of demonic life force and the stasis of absolute zero. My master will find it an invaluable addition to his collection before its inevitable erasure. He finally focused his gaze fully on Naruto. But you are something else entirely. Your life signature is an anomaly. It is not of this world. It is loud, chaotic. It stinks of unbridled life. You are a fascinating new specimen to be catalogued. Who is your master? Naruto asked, his body tensing. The calm demeanor was gone, replaced by the coiled readiness of a warrior. The one who promises the great silence. The man said with an unnerving, placid smile. The god of absolute order. Anksarum. He seeks to cleanse the universe of the corruption of sentient thought and the chaotic energies you call magic and chakra. I am merely his archivist, tasked with documenting unique phenomena before they are purified. The archivist raised a hand. He wasn't preparing a spell. He was analyzing a complex magical formula, visible only to Naruto's sage senses, surrounded Naruto, mapping his chakra pathways, analyzing his cellular structure. Remarkable, the archivist murmured. A symbiotic fusion with a separate, massive energy entity. A mortal host containing a godlike power. A paradox. You must be preserved for study. He didn't attack. He pointed a finger, and a beam of pale, white light shot toward Naruto. It wasn't destructive. It was deconstructive. It was designed to unravel the very bonds that held Naruto's chakra network together. Naruto didn't dodge. He held up a hand, and a truth-seeking orb, a sphere of perfect, malleable blackness, materialized from his back and floated before his palm. The white beam struck the orb and was simply erased. Utterly consumed. The archivist's eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. Negation of magical and physical properties. A substance that defies the laws of this reality. You are more interesting than I could have possibly imagined. I'm done talking, Naruto said. In the next instant, he moved. He crossed the distance between them in a flash, not with the body flicker technique, but with pure, unadulterated speed. He aimed a punch not at the archivist, but at the spot where the archivist was going to be. The archivist teleported a few feet to the left, his expression smug, only to find Naruto's fist waiting for him. Shock Regis teared on his face as the punch connected, sending him flying backward, skidding across the stone floor. How? He gasped, pushing himself up, a trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. I calculated your trajectory. You think too much, Naruto said, as 24 shadow clones burst into existence around the temple, their presence overwhelming the archivist's analytical senses. You can't calculate chaos. The clones swarmed. The archivist, for all his intellectual prowess, was not a frontline combatant. He erected shimmering shields, fired more deconstructive beams, and teleported frantically around the chamber. But the clones were relentless. They herded him, cut off his escape routes, and forced him into a corner. It was a masterful display of battlefield control. Primary anomaly. The archivist hissed, realizing he was outmatched. Your existence is an intolerable variable. You will be prioritized for purification. A brilliant flash of light erupted from his body, forcing the clones and the fairy tale mages to shield their eyes. When the light faded, he was gone. But a small, black crystal he had dropped pulsed once, and a wave of void energy washed over Deliora's icy prison. The ice didn't melt. It began to crack from within, the dark energy destabilizing Erza's spell. He's accelerating the revival, Gray yelled in panic. The colossal ice block groaned, fissures spreading across its surface. Deliora was waking up, while Erza and Gray frantically tried to shore up the ice, their magic proving ineffective against the void energy. Natsu tried to smash it, which only made things worse. Lucy, meanwhile, was pinned down by Lion's remaining mages, the puppeteer Sherry and the dog man Toby, who had recovered from their shock and were now trying to stop them. My beautiful doll will crush you. You blonde bimbo, Sherry shrieked, sending a giant rock monster lumbering toward Lucy. Lucy fumbled for her keys. Open. Gate of the Golden Bull. Taurus. The giant minotaur appeared, but Toby's paralyzing claws managed to scratch him, slowing his movements. Lucy was cornered, her face pale with fear. Just as the rock monster raised its fists to crush her, a shadow fell over it. Naruto landed silently on its head, his expression unreadable. He tapped a single finger on its stony scalp. A small, intricate seal formula spread from the point of contact, glowing blue. The rock monster froze, then crumbled into a pile of inert dust. He dropped to the ground in front of Lucy, turning to face a stunned Sherry and Toby. He didn't even look at them. He looked at Lucy. Your spirits are your partners, he said, his voice calm and steady in the chaos. They draw strength from you. Trust in their strength, and they will trust in yours. You are more powerful than you think, Lucy. His words, filled with an unshakable confidence in her, struck a chord deep within her. It wasn't pity, it was encouragement, a transfer of belief. Her fear receded, replaced by a surge of determination. She looked at him, at this incredible man who fought gods and monsters, and he believed in her. Naruto turned his attention to the cracking ice. The void energy was like a poison. He couldn't just freeze it again. He had to purge it. He placed both hands on the surface of the ice. Kurama, I need nature energy. Clean, pure. On it, the fox grunted. A wave of pure, vibrant life force, drawn from the island, the sea. The very air, flowed through Naruto and into the ice. It was the absolute antithesis of the cold, dead void energy. The purple glow of the moon drip flickered and died. The black veins of the archivist's spell sizzled and evaporated. The cracks in the ice stopped spreading. But Deliora was already dead. It's just a shell, Gray whispered, his hand on the ice. The immense evil they had felt was gone. Erza's iced shell hadn't just frozen the demon. Over 10 long years, her life energy had slowly, completely eroded its own, until nothing was left but a husk. Leon's quest had been for nothing from the very beginning. The realization shattered Leon. He fell to his knees, his dream turning to dust. The fight was over. Later that evening, after they had destroyed the moon drip ritual and convinced the villagers that the curse would now fade with time, the team set up camp on the beach. Natsu and Gray were already arguing over who had contributed more, their voices a familiar, comforting background noise. Erza found Naruto by the water's edge, sharpening a kunai on a whetstone. The setting sun cast long shadows on the sand. I have never seen tactics like that, she said, her arms crossed. The way you used those copies of yourself, it was like watching a master strategist play a game of shogi, with the battlefield as your board. Naruto didn't look up. It's just a clone technique. Good for diversions. It's more than that, she insisted. And the way you move, your skill is beyond anything I've ever encountered. She drew her sword, its steel gleaming in the twilight. I would ask for a demonstration. A spar. No magic. No chakra. Just skill against skill. He finally looked up, a glint of interest in his eyes. A spar without the world-ending stakes. A conversation in the language of combat. He stood, slipping the kunai into its pouch. All right. They faced each other on the wet sand. For a moment, there was only the sound of the waves. Then, they moved. It was a breathtaking dance of deadly grace. Erza's swordsmanship was peerless, a torrent of precise, powerful slashes and parries. She was a master of her craft, every movement perfect. Through years of relentless training. But Naruto was her equal. He flowed around her attacks, his kunai a blur, deflecting her blade with sparks of steel. He didn't use brute force. He used her momentum against her, redirecting her strikes, slipping inside her guard with a speed that was almost supernatural. He wasn't trying to beat her. He was matching her. He responded to her every move, anticipated her every thrust. It was less a fight and more a high-speed collaboration. They pushed each other, their movements becoming faster, more fluid, a blur of scarlet hair and golden blonde, of gleaming steel and dark metal. The spar ended with Naruto's kunai at her throat and her sword tip pressed against his heart. They were both breathless, their chests heaving, sweat beading on their brows. A wide, exhilarating grin spread across Naruto's face, the first truly joyous expression any of them had seen from him. Erza's expression was one of pure, unadulterated shock and exhilaration. She lowered her sword, a laugh bubbling up from her chest. It was a rare, beautiful sound. I've never met anyone who could keep up, she admitted, her cheeks flushed, her eyes shining with a newfound brilliance. The respect she felt for him had, in the heat of their dance, been forged into something sharper, warmer, and infinitely more potent. It was attraction, clear and undeniable. Later that night, the moon, now a normal, silvery white, hung high in the sky. Naruto sat alone on a dune, staring up at the stars. He found a familiar pattern, a great celestial fox, and felt a pang of homesickness. They're beautiful, aren't they? Lucy sat down beside him, holding out a piece of fruit. Natsu's asleep, so there's finally some quiet. He accepted the fruit with a nod. The stars are different here. But some of the stories are the same. What do you mean? She asked, tilting her head. The constellations, he said, pointing. Back home, we have stories for them too. Great heroes, fearsome beasts, tragic lovers. They're a map of our history, written in the sky. He looked at her, his blue eyes gentle in the moonlight. Tell me one of your stories. One of your spirits. So she did. She told him the story of Aquarius. Of her tempestuous attitude and the love she held for her boyfriend, Scorpio. She told him of Cancer's quirky speech and loyalty, of Taurus's lecherous but protective nature. She spoke of them not as weapons, but as people, as her flawed, wonderful, infuriating friends. And he listened. He listened with an intensity and sincerity that made her feel like the most important person in the world. He saw the value in her magic, the strength in her bonds, in a way that no one, not even she herself, fully had before. When she finished, there were tears in her eyes. Thank you for listening, she whispered. Thank you for sharing, he replied, his voice just as soft. Their hands brushed, and a spark, as bright and warm as the stars above, passed between them. They returned to the guild triumphant, bringing a repentant Leon and his crew with them. Makarov, after a stern lecture, agreed to let them work off their debt to the island under Fairy Tail's supervision. The guild hall erupted in celebration. But Naruto couldn't shake the archivist's words. Primary anomaly. The Great Silence. Anksarum. He had saved one world only to be thrown into another one that was under threat. The burden felt heavier than ever. Later that night, long after the party had died down, he stood in the guild's empty training yard, staring at his hand, at the black Fairy Tail emblem. He felt like an imposter. A harbinger of a conflict this peaceful world was not ready for. It's a heavy weight, isn't it? Mirajane's voice was a soft melody in the quiet night. She approached him, her height hair glowing like a halo in the moonlight. She wasn't smiling. Her expression was serious, her blue eyes filled with a deep, knowing empathy. The being you fought on the island, she said, her voice firm. I felt it when you fought the Eisenwald mages, and I felt it again from the reports. It's emptiness. It's a threat not just to you, but to everything we love. To this guild, to our family. She stopped in front of him and placed a gentle hand on his arm. Her touch was warm, grounding. You carry a great power, and now you carry a great burden. But you came here. You accepted our mark. Her eyes met his, and he saw in them an ironclad resolve that mirrored Erza's, but was tempered with a gentle, fierce love that was uniquely hers. You're one of us now, Naruto. Your fight is our fight. Her declaration was not just one of support. It was one of absolute solidarity. She wasn't just offering to help. She was telling him that his demons were now her demons, too. That his war was now her war. In that moment, she ceased to be just a kind bartender or a powerful mage. She became his anchor, his confidant, the one who saw the entirety of his monstrous power and the crushing weight that came with it. And chose to stand by his side without hesitation. The loneliness that had clung to him like a shroud since his arrival finally, truly, began to recede. He was not alone. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. A Requiem for Phantoms. The piece was a fragile, beautiful thing, and it shattered like glass. It started with a silent, brutal ambush. Team Shadow Gear, Levi, Jet, and Droy, were found late one night. Pinned to the great tree in Magnolia's Central Park. They were battered, bleeding, and unconscious. Nailed to the tree above them was a crest of black iron, a skeletal phantom, its hollow eyes a declaration of war. Phantom Lord, the wealthiest and most powerful guild in Fury, and Fairy Tail's bitter rival. The atmosphere in the guild hall turned from boisterous chaos to a cold, simmering fury. Naruto stood with the others, looking at Levi Magarden as she was carefully brought down, her small body covered in bruises. He had come to like the little solid script mage. She was one of the few who wasn't intimidated by him, often approaching him with a stack of books, her eyes alight with academic curiosity about his fuinjutsu. Seeing her so cruelly broken ignited a familiar, cold fire in his gut. Makarov's voice was dangerously low. They have gone too far. Natsu was a storm of barely contained rage. I'm gonna burn them all to ash. This was a deliberate, calculated attack, Erza said, her voice tight. Her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. This is a challenge. They're trying to provoke us into a war. Naruto said nothing. He simply watched, his sage mode active, feeling the waves of anger, grief, and hatred rolling through his new family. He felt the pain of Jet and Droy, the raw fury of Natsu, the cold, murderous rage building in Makarov. He remembered the smell of a hospital after Paine's assault on Konoha, the sight of his broken friends. The script was different, but the story was the same. Power used to crush the weak, to sow fear and dominance. He had promised Mirajane that his fight was their fight. He was beginning to realize it was the other way around, too. The first blow was followed by a second, more brazen one. The next morning, the entire guild woke to a sound like the sky being torn apart. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, pulling on his jacket as he ran outside with everyone else. He looked up and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. The Phantom Lord Guild Hall, a monstrous fortress on giant, mechanical legs, was marching toward them. It bristled with cannons, the largest of which was a magical convergence cannon of immense power, Jupiter. They brought their entire guild to our doorstep. Gray exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. They mean to wipe us off the map, Erza said grimly, already re-equipping into her Heart Cruise armor. A deep, resonant boom echoed across the town as the Jupiter cannon fired. A massive beam of pure magical energy, thick as a building, screamed toward their home. Makarov met it head-on. He grew to his giant form in a heartbeat, a colossus of righteous fury, and braced himself. The beam slammed into him, engulfing him in a blinding explosion. When the light faded, the guild hall was still standing. But Makarov was on one knee, smoking and grievously wounded, his giant form flickering. Master! Mirajane cried out, her hands flying to her mouth. Naruto's eyes narrowed. The power of that cannon was immense, but Makarov was a wizard saint. For him to be so heavily injured by a single shot, there was something wrong. His senses tasted it again. The faint, loying emptiness of void energy mixed in with the magical blast. It wasn't just a powerful attack, it was designed to poison the very magic it touched. The Archivist. His influence was spreading. While the guild reeled, the real attack began. The front of the Phantom Lord fortress opened, and hundreds of their mages poured out, a tide of black and purple. At their head was a man whose body was covered in metal piercings, with wild black hair and a savage grin. Gajiel Red Fox, the Iron Dragon Slayer. He laughed, a sound like grinding gears. Hey, look at the little fairies. Ready to get squashed. Natsu, seeing another Dragon Slayer, saw red. You're the one who hurt Levi. He roared, and shot forward, his body wreathed in flames. The battle for Magnolia began. The streets became a war zone. Erza was a whirlwind of steel, cutting a swath through the Phantom Lord ranks. Gray's ice lances flew, creating walls and traps. Elfman Strauss, Mirajane's hulking younger brother, entered his beast soul form, roaring about being a real man, as he tossed enemies aside like dolls. Naruto moved through the chaos with a detached, lethal grace. He didn't want to kill any of them. They were misguided, arrogant. But they were still just mages, not soldiers hardened by years of life or death conflict. So he held back. A precise chop to the neck. A clone fainting left while the real one swept the legs. He was a phantom himself, disabling dozens of enemies without drawing a single drop of blood. His efficiency was terrifying. The Phantom Lord mages would turn to face him, and in the next moment, they'd be on the ground. Their fight over before it began. He was a one-man army, holding an entire flank by himself, ensuring the enemy couldn't push past the river and into the civilian sectors of the town. But for every soldier they took down, two more seemed to take their place. Phantom Lord's numbers were overwhelming. And then, the true horror of their plan was revealed. Lucy, who had stayed behind to help the wounded, was suddenly snatched from the guild hall by a torrent of water magic. A woman with short blue hair and a blank expression, Juvia Loxer of the Element 4, held her captive. The daughter of the Heartfilia concern, a voice boomed from the fortress, amplified by magic. It was Jose Porla, Phantom Lord's master. Your father hired us to bring you home, little runaway. Our capture will pay for the destruction of this pathetic guild. They had been after Lucy all along. The attack on Levi, the war, it was all a diversion. Naruto heard her scream. He saw her being dragged toward the enemy fortress. And in that moment, the calm, controlled restraint he had been exercising, evaporated. Kurama felt the shift. The air around Naruto crackled. The temperature dropped several degrees. His eyes, once a calm blue, blazed with a cold, cerulean fire. His pupils sharpened into slits. A pressure, immense and ancient, radiated from him, so powerful that mages from both guilds stumbled to a halt. Gasping for breath, it felt like the sky was pressing down on them. Gajiel Red Fox, who had been brutally manhandling a winded Natsu, froze. He felt a primal fear, the instant court of a lesser predator suddenly finding itself in the presence of an apex one. He looked over and saw Naruto, standing perfectly still in the middle of the street, radiating an aura that made his iron scales tremble. Naruto didn't shout, he didn't roar, his voice was a low, deadly whisper that carried across the entire battlefield. You made this personal. He vanished. Not a blur, not a flicker. One moment he was there, and the next, he was gone. He reappeared directly in front of Juvia, who was still holding Lucy. The water mage's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't even seen him move. Before she could react, he tapped 2 fingers on her forehead. A simple, precise pulse of chakra disrupted her nervous system, and she slumped to the ground, unconscious. He caught Lucy before she could fall, one arm securely around her waist. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with terror and relief. His face was a mask of cold fury, but his hold on her was surprisingly gentle. It's okay, he said, his voice soft, a stark contrast to the glacial rage in his eyes. I've got you. He turned to face the fortress. From his vantage point, he could see the main hall of the Phantom Lord Guild. He could see Gajil, staring at him in disbelief. And he could see their master, Jose, on his throne, his face a mask of shock and fury. 6 paths. Sage art, Naruto murmured, so low only Lucy could hear. A minuscule black receiver, no bigger than a needle, formed in his hand. He flicked it with his thumb. It shot through the air, too fast to see, and embedded itself harmlessly in the floor of the Phantom Lord Guild Hall. Right at Gajil's feet. Then, Naruto and Lucy were gone again, reappearing back inside the relative safety of the Fairy Tail Guild Hall in a flash of yellow light. The Hiraishin, the Flying Thunder God technique. A jutsu he hadn't used since the war. A jutsu he had marked on that receiver. He set Lucy down gently. Mirajane rushed to her, pulling her into a protective embrace. "Are you all right, Lucy?" Mira asked, her voice trembling with anger. I think so," Lucy stammered, still reeling. Naruto just. Erza stood before him, her sword at the ready. "Naruto, your power, I've never felt anything like it." "Their master, Jose," Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the enemy fortress. "His magic is tainted with the same void energy as the Jupiter cannon. The archivist has his claws in this guild. He's promised Jose the power to crush Makarov in exchange for the Heartfilia fortune." "How do you know?" Erza asked. "Because I can feel it," he said. "And I can feel something else." He's powering up the cannon again. As if on cue, the massive barrel of the Jupiter began to glow, its energy building far faster this time. "It's charging too quickly," Gray yelled. "We can't block another shot." "We don't have to block it," Naruto said. He walked to the shattered doorway of the guild, standing in full view of the enemy. He held out his hand, palm up. Wind began to gather, howling around his arm. A sphere of pure white chakra, no bigger than his fist, formed in his palm. But then, it began to change. 4 massive, blade-like points of wind erupted from the sphere, screaming like a banshee. They spun with impossible speed, a miniature hurricane of unimaginable cutting power. "Wind style. Recentrican. What is that?" Natsu breathed, his own fire magic seeming like a candle flame in the face of this maelstrom. "Everyone, get down," Naruto commanded. The Jupiter fired. A colossal beam of dark, corrupted energy surged toward them. Naruto threw the Recentrican. It flew, not as a projectile, but as a living, shrieking entity. It met the Jupiter blast halfway. There was no grand explosion. The Recentrican, with its millions of microscopic wind blades, simply unmade the blast. It tore through the beam, atomizing the corrupted magic, shredding it into harmless, glittering particles. And it didn't stop. It continued on its path, a screaming shuriken of death, and carved a line straight through the left leg of the giant Phantom Lord fortress. Metal, stone, and magical conduits were sliced apart at a molecular level. With a groan of protesting metal, the entire fortress listed, its leg giving way, and it crashed to the ground, kicking up a tidal wave of dust and debris. Silence. Utter, profound silence descended upon the battlefield. Every single mage, friend and foe alike, stared in abject, horrified awe. He hadn't just stopped their ultimate weapon. He had broken their entire guild in a single, effortless attack. Inside the fallen fortress, Jose Porla was trembling, not with rage, but with fear. What is he?" he stammered. Gajil was on his feet, his iron skin bristling. "He's a monster," he growled. But his bravado was hollow. He had felt the power of that attack. It was on a level he couldn't even comprehend. The battle should have been over. But Jose was desperate. He had been promised power. The archivist had delivered. "Fine," Jose shrieked, his eyes glowing with a purple, void-like energy. "If I can't have the girl, then this whole town will be erased." Abyss break. The sky above Magnolia darkened. A vast, complex magical circle, miles wide, began to form. Swirling with the same dead energy as the Jupiter. It was a forbidden spell, a curse of immense destructive power, now amplified by the void. "He's going to destroy the whole town," Erza shouted. Naruto didn't even look at the sky. He looked at the mark on the floor of the Phantom Lord Guild Hall, the one only he could see. "I'm ending this," he said. In another flash of yellow, he was gone. He reappeared inside the throne room of the Phantom Lord Fortress, standing directly in front of a terrified Jose Porla. Jose shrieked and blasted him with a torrent of shade magic. But Naruto simply walked through it, the dark tendrils dissipating harmlessly against his chakra cloak. Your power isn't yours, Naruto said, his voice dangerously calm. It's borrowed from something that wants to unmake everything you are. He didn't punch Jose. He didn't blast him with a Rasengan. He placed a hand on the man's forehead. 6 paths. Genjutsu release, he murmured. He didn't just break the archivist's influence, he forcibly dragged Jose's consciousness into a shared mindscape. For a fraction of a second, Jose Porla experienced what it was to be connected to the void. He felt the cold, dispassionate emptiness of Anksaram's will. The desire to erase all life, all sound, all thought. He saw the universe as a silent, black canvas, and his own existence as a meaningless, noisy stain upon it. The psychic shock was absolute. Jose's eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed, the abyss break spell fizzling out in the sky above. The connection to the archivist was severed, not by force, but by pure, terrifying understanding. Naruto stood over the fallen guild master. The room was silent except for the harsh breathing of the only other person there. Gajiel Red Fox. The Iron Dragon Slayer stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. This blonde kid hadn't just defeated their master. He had dismantled him, soul and all, without throwing a single punch. Naruto turned to face him. The cold fury was gone from his eyes, replaced by a weary sadness. He looked at Gajiel, at his piercings, his aggressive posture, the desperate need for dominance radiating from him. And he didn't see an enemy. He saw a lonely, angry boy. He saw a reflection of himself, of the pariah who would paint the Hokage monument just to be seen, to be acknowledged. He saw Gaara, a fellow Jinchuriki who had found strength only in killing. Is this what you wanted, Gajiel? Naruto asked, his voice quiet. To be feared, to have everyone look at you and see a monster. Does it make you feel strong? Gajiel flinched as if struck. What do you know about it? He snarled, trying to summon his bravado. I know everything about it, Naruto said, and for the first time. He let his own chakra cloak flicker, revealing the swirling, demonic red energy of Kurama underneath for just a second. The sheer density of that hateful, ancient power made Gajiel stumble back, his instincts screaming. I've lived my whole life with a monster inside me. I know what it's like to have people hate you for something you can't control. I know what it's like to think that the only way to prove you exist is to hurt others. He took a step closer. But that's a lie. Real strength isn't about making people fear you. It's about having people you want to protect. He looked Gajiel in the eye. You hurt my friend. You hurt my family. For that, you deserve a beating. But I look at you, and I don't see an enemy. I see a man who's lost his way. You have power. You're a dragon slayer. You could be a hero. Or you can keep being this bully. And you'll die alone. The choice is yours. Leaving the stunned Gajiel standing in the ruins of his guild, Naruto turned and walked away. The war was over. In the aftermath, Makarov, now recovering but weak, made a decision. He would not seek retribution. He would disband Phantom Lord, but he would let its mages go free. And on Naruto's personal recommendation, he offered a place in Fairy Tail to a shocked Juvia and a deeply conflicted Gajiel. This act of forgiveness, of choosing to build rather than destroy, was a testament to Naruto's influence. That evening, Naruto was sitting on the edge of the guild's newly repaired roof, watching the stars come out. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a familiar ache. He had won. He had protected his new friends. But the scale of his power, the ease with which he had ended the conflict, only served to highlight how different he was. It was a wall between him and them. He heard footsteps and turned to see Lucy, Erza, and Mirajane climbing onto the roof, each holding a warm drink. They didn't speak at first, just settled around him. Lucy to his right, Erza to his left, Mira sitting just behind him. Her presence a warm, comforting weight. You saved me, Lucy said softly, breaking the silence. You saved all of us. She was looking at him with an expression of pure, unadulterated adoration. The fear and intimidation were gone, replaced by a deep, heartfelt gratitude that was almost overwhelming. You showed a monster mercy, Erza said, her voice filled with a quiet awe. She was looking at him not just as a warrior, but as a leader, as a man whose moral compass was as strong as his power. The respect in her eyes had deepened into something profound, a magnetic pull she no longer tried to fight. You offered Gajil a second chance. After what he did, I don't think I could have done that. You saw the good in him, Mirajane whispered from behind him, her voice filled with a gentle warmth that chased away the last of the evening's chill. Just like you saw the caged beast in me, and the lost little boy in Leon. You don't just defeat your enemies, Naruto. You save them. She saw him not just as a savior or a powerhouse, but as a healer of broken souls. Her connection to him felt deeper than simple empathy now, it felt like a fundamental alignment of their spirits. They sat there, a silent island of peace in a world that was just beginning to heal. Naruto looked at the three women around him. The knight who saw his strength and met it with her own. The celestial mage who he made feel safe, and who in turn filled his world with stories and light. The demon who saw his burden and offered to share its weight without question. In his own world, love had always been a distant, complicated thing. His love for Sakura, unrequited. Hinata's love for him, which he had only just begun to understand before he was torn away. Here, it was different. It wasn't one-sided. It wasn't a competition. It was a confluence. Three different rivers of affection, all flowing toward him. Lucy, emboldened by the events of the day and the quiet intimacy of the moment, tentatively reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were small and warm in his. He didn't pull away. He simply squeezed her hand gently. On his other side, Erza, in a move of uncharacteristic boldness, rested her head on his shoulder. He could feel the solid weight of her, a grounding presence that spoke of trust and reliance. From behind, Mirajane leaned forward, resting her chin on his other shoulder. Her long white hair tickling his neck. He was surrounded, not trapped, but anchored. A silent, profound understanding passed between the three women. In the starlight, their eyes met over him. There was no jealousy, no rivalry, only a shared, unspoken acknowledgement. They all loved this incredible, lonely, powerful man who had fallen from the sky and become the unshakable heart of their guild. It was Lucy who, blushing furiously but with a determined look in her eyes, voiced the thought that hung in the air between them. In our guild, she whispered, her voice barely audible, family isn't defined by normal rules. We're a messy, chaotic, weird bunch. Why should love be any different? Erza's breath hitched, but she didn't move. A small, almost imperceptible nod was her answer. Mirajane's smile was soft and radiant in the dim light. She, too, understood. They were fairy tale mages. They made their own rules. They built their own family. Naruto, who had spent a lifetime craving the warmth of family, who had lost everything he had ever known, felt a surge of emotion so powerful it almost brought tears to his eyes. He looked from Lucy's hopeful face, to Erza's strong and steady presence, to Mirajane's gentle, knowing smile. He was home. This was his home. This was his family. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Tower of Broken Promises. The aftermath of the Phantom Lord War settled into a new, strange kind of normal. Gajil and Juvia's integration into the guild was rocky. Gajil spent most of his time sulking in corners, chewing on scrap metal, and getting destructive brawls with Natsu that usually ended with Naruto intervening, grabbing both dragon slayers by the scruff of their necks and holding them apart like squabbling puppies. Juvia, on the other hand, had developed a borderline obsessive affection for Gray, which he met with panicked, often shirtless, confusion. Through it all, the dynamic between Naruto, Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy shifted. It was an unspoken truth, a quiet orbit they had all settled into. On missions, they moved as a single, devastatingly effective unit. In the guild hall, they were a calm epicenter in the daily hurricane of activity. A chair would always be left open for Naruto between Erza and Lucy at the bar. Mirajane's hand would often find his shoulder in a casual, grounding touch as she passed by. There were no grand declarations, just a comfortable, constant presence. But a storm was gathering on the horizon, one aimed directly at the heart of their new, fragile union. It began with a trip. A vacation, Natsu echoed, his eyes wide. To a luxury resort, Lucy beamed, holding up 4 golden tickets. I won them. Akane Resort, The finest hotel and casino on the coast. And I'm taking you guys. She pointed at Natsu, Gray, and Erza. Then her gaze flickered to Naruto, who was sitting nearby, and she blushed. And, Naruto-san, if you'd like to come too. Erza's posture straightened almost imperceptibly. A trip to the beach does sound relaxing. We've earned a rest. Her eyes met Naruto's, an unspoken invitation in their depths. Before Naruto could answer, Mirajane, who had been listening from behind the bar, chimed in with her ever-present, radiant smile. That sounds wonderful, Lucy. But I'm afraid I can't get away. Someone has to keep the guild from burning down while you're all gone. She winked at Naruto. You make sure they behave. It was a simple statement, but the look in her eyes conveyed a deeper trust, a quiet understanding of his role not just as a powerhouse, but as the group's anchor. And so, their vacation began. The resort was as glamorous as advertised. Natsu and Gray immediately started a competition to see who could cause the most collateral damage in the casino. Lucy reveled in the luxury. But Erza was distant, her gaze often lost on the horizon, a deep melancholy clinging to her that even her formidable armor couldn't conceal. Naruto noticed. He found her standing on a balcony overlooking the sea, the moonlight turning her scarlet hair to the color of dried blood. She was staring at a distant, needle-like structure that jutted out of the ocean miles away. The Tower of Heaven. Something's wrong, Erza, he said, not as a question, but as a statement. He stood beside her, not crowding her, just offering his presence. She was silent for a long time, the sea breeze whipping strands of hair across her face. It's a place from my past, she said finally, her voice low and strained. A past I thought I had escaped. He waited. He didn't push, didn't offer platitudes. He just waited, a silent, steady pillar of support. And so, she told him. She spoke of a childhood stolen, of being enslaved to build a tower meant to resurrect a dark god. She spoke of the friends she'd made there, Sho, Wally, Miliana, Simon, and she spoke of Jelal, the kind, brave boy who had inspired them, who had given her a surname, Scarlet, for her beautiful hair. The boy who, after leading a rebellion, was captured and twisted, possessed by the spirit of the dark wizard Zirf, becoming a cruel tyrant who had exiled her and kept their friends enslaved. Her voice cracked as she spoke. The pain is fresh as if it were yesterday. He told me if I ever returned, he would kill everyone in the tower. I ran. I was a coward. I left them behind. Naruto listened to her confession, to the guilt and sorrow she had carried alone for so many years. When she was finished, her shoulders were shaking, the formidable Titania reduced to the scared little girl she had once been. He didn't offer pity. He didn't tell her it wasn't her fault. He offered something far more valuable, understanding. I was an outcast, too, he said quietly. His voice was a low rumble, drawing her from her spiral of self-loathing. The monster inside me, it killed the parents of everyone in my village. They didn't see me. They only saw the demon. For years, my only friend was my sensei. The loneliness, it's a heavy cloak to wear. He looked at her, his sage eyes seeing not just the S-class mage, but the frightened child burdened by a promise made in terror. You didn't run because you were a coward, Erza. You ran to protect them. Because the boy you trusted made you believe it was the only way. You carried that pain alone because you thought it was your burden to bear. That isn't cowardice. That's strength. Tears she hadn't even realized she was holding back began to stream down her face. In all the years since she'd joined Fairy Tail, no one had ever understood the true weight of her choice. They saw her strength, but he saw her sacrifice. She finally let out a shuddering sob, the armor she wore around her heart cracking wide open. Without thinking, she leaned into him, and his arm came around her, holding her steady as years of repressed grief poured out. Their moment of fragile peace was shattered by an explosion. The casino erupted in chaos. Figures from Erza's past, her childhood friends, had come for her. Wally, with his blockish body, Miliana, with her cat-like obsession, and Sho, now a young man who looked at Erza with eyes full of betrayal. They attacked Natsu and Gray, and in the confusion, a man with a crystalline arm, Vidaldus Taka, incapacitated Lucy and Juvia, who had arrived to help. Jello wants to see you, Erza, Sho said, his voice cold. He's prepared a sacrifice. Your body, For Zeref's resurrection, he trapped Erza in a pocket dimension contained within a set of cards and, before Naruto or the others could stop them, they vanished. Naruto's calm demeanor vanished. A wave of killing intent, cold and absolute, washed over the ruined casino. He turned to a stunned Natsu and Gray, his voice leaving no room for argument. Where is that tower? Their rescue mission was frantic. Simon, another of Erza's childhood friends who had escaped and allied himself with Juvia, guided them. He explained Jalal's plan, to use Erza's body, a vessel with the same magical potential as Zeref himself, to complete the R system, and bring the Dark Wizard back to life. As they sailed toward the ominous tower, Naruto's Sage Mode was in overdrive. The tower pulsed with a malevolent energy, a twisted fusion of Ethernano and the familiar, dead void of Anksaram's influence. But there was something else. A psychic presence, subtle and insidious, coiled around the tower's core like a snake. It was a puppeteer, pulling the strings. This Jelal isn't just possessed, Naruto thought, his eyes narrowed. He's being controlled. This is more than just some dark wizard's scheme. They stormed the tower. The battles were fierce. Natsu, Gray, and Lucy fought against Jalal's top assassins. But Naruto had only one goal. He moved through the tower like a wraith, disabling guards with non-lethal efficiency. His senses locked onto Erza's chakra signature. He found her in the throne room at the tower's apex. She was trapped in a binding spell, Jelal standing over her, his hand glowing with dark energy. Your body will serve a glorious purpose, Erza, Jelal said, his voice laced with a zealous fervor. You will be the vessel for Lord Zeref's return. Jelal, please, this isn't you, Erza pleaded, struggling against her bonds. This is exactly who I am. The one who will bring true freedom to this world. Naruto appeared in the doorway, a silent, deadly presence. No, he said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. This is what you've been made to be. Jelal spun around, his eyes widening. You, the anomaly from Galuna Island. The archivist warned me about you. And I can feel his master's stench all over you, Naruto shot back. Let her go. A cruel smile twisted Jalal's face. But behind the cruelty, Naruto saw it, a flicker of the terrified boy Erza had described. Trapped in his own mind. A new voice, smooth and venomous, spoke, not from Jalal's mouth, but seemingly from the air around him. The primary anomaly. I did not expect you to interfere in this vector of the plan. A shadowy, ethereal figure detached itself from Jelal, coalescing into a form that looked like a mockery of a holy man, clad in black robes, his face obscured by a cowl of shifting darkness. This was not a physical being. It was a psychic projection, a wraith of pure, malevolent will. I am the heretic, the shadow figure announced. A herald of the great silence. The archivist collects knowledge. The executioner purges threats. My purpose is more nuanced. I foment the chaos that precedes the silence. What better way to prove the flaw of this reality than to resurrect its greatest paradox, the black wizard Zeref, who cannot die, yet brings death to all life. His existence is a scream of defiance against order. A scream my master, Anksaram, must answer. You're twisting his pain into a weapon, Naruto growled, his chakra flaring to life, a golden sun in the dark throne room. Pain is the most effective tool for change, the heretic replied smoothly. He gestured to Naruto. You understand pain, don't you, Naruto Uzumaki? The pain of loss. The pain of a world stolen from you. The heretic's voice slithered directly into Naruto's mind. This world is a flaw. An ugly, chaotic stain on the perfection of the void. But you do not belong here. You are a loose thread. Help us cleanse this mistake, and the master of order can rewrite the rules of reality. He can unspin the thread of your existence. He can send you home. The offer hung in the air, a beautiful, poisonous temptation. Home, Konoha, his friends, everything he had lost. For a single, agonizing moment, he saw it. The faces of Sakura, Kakashi, Iruka, Hinata. The view from the Hokage monument. Kurama roared in his mindscape. Kid, don't listen. It's a lie. Naruto's jaw tightened. He looked past the heretic, his gaze locking with Erza's. He saw the terror in her eyes, but also the unshakable faith she had placed in him on that balcony. He thought of Lucis' bright, hopeful smile, of Mirajane's quiet Steadfast belief in him. His home was no longer a memory. It was here. My home, Naruto said, his voice ringing with absolute conviction, is with Fairy Tail. The golden chakra around him exploded outward. He didn't enter his Biju avatar, not yet. He unleashed his Biju mode, a torrent of pure, condensed life energy. The golden cloak was so bright it was almost white, his body marked with the black seals of the 6 paths. This power, a perfect fusion of human spirit and raw life force, was anathema to the heretic's void-touched essence. The shadowy form recoiled, hissing like water on a hot stone. A being of pure connection. The heretic shrieked, his composure breaking. You are the antithesis of the silence. You must be erased. He merged back with Jelal, and the blue-haired mage's power skyrocketed. He flew into the sky above the tower, raising his hands. Then witnessed the true power of a god. Meteor. He became a streak of golden light, moving at impossible speeds, slamming into Naruto from all directions. The tower shook with the force of the impacts. But Naruto stood his ground, a rock in a hurricane. He didn't even need to block. His chakra cloak, a shield of pure positive energy, absorbed the blows. From across Fury, the Magic Council, panicked by the activation of the R system, made a terrible decision. They voted to fire the Etherian cannon, a satellite weapon of continental destructive power, to destroy the tower and everyone in it. On the tower, alarms blared. A voice from the communication lacrima announced the impending strike. Erza's eyes widened in horror. She knew the power of Etherian. It would not just destroy the tower, it would obliterate everything for miles. Her friends, Natsu, Gray, Lucy, were still inside. No, she screamed. Jello laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. Yes, the Etherian will pour its power into the tower. It will give me the 2.7 billion Edias I need to complete the ritual. My plan is complete. Erza's face was a mask of desperate resolve. She used her own magic to break her bonds. There was only one way. To save her friends, she had to stop the Etherian. And the only way to stop that much power was to absorb it herself. She began to merge with the lacrima of the tower, her body glowing. If this is the only way to save the people I love, then I will gladly give my life. Erza, no. Natsu screamed, having just arrived on the scene, battered but not beaten. He was too late. She was already being drawn into the crystal. But a golden hand caught her wrist. Naruto was there, his expression grim. I'm not letting another friend sacrifice themselves for my sake. He pulled her back, and then turned to face the core of the tower as a colossal beam of rainbow-colored energy descended from the heavens. The Etherian blast. He didn't try to block it. He didn't try to counter it. He held out his hands, and 9 truth-seeking orbs, the ultimate defense and offense, spun into existence behind him. They flew forward, expanding and merging into a single, perfect black sphere that engulfed the top of the tower, Naruto and Erza within it. Ninjutsu. Sphere of absolute nothingness. The Etherian blast slammed into the black sphere. And vanished. Not absorbed, not deflected. It was simply gone. The sphere, a localized distortion of reality, a pocket of true void that he controlled, had negated the attack completely. Inside the silent, black sphere, Erza stared at him, her mind unable to comprehend what had just happened. He had just nullified a world-breaking power with casual grace. But the fight wasn't over. The energy from the Etherian, while negated, had still supercharged the tower. Jelal, now a being of immense, unstable power, floated before them, the heretic's influence driving him mad. You will not interfere. Jelal, heretic roared. He unleashed his ultimate spell, heavenly body magic. Sema, pulling actual meteors from orbit down toward the tower. Naruto looked at him, his sage eyes seeing the terrified soul trapped within the cage of the heretic's control. He couldn't just destroy him. He had to save him. Erza, get Natsu and the others clear, he ordered, his voice calm. I'll finish this. He flew toward Jelal, weaving through the descending meteorites. Kurama's chakra flared, and a massive golden avatar, a titanic fox with 9 tails, formed around Naruto. It wasn't the full Biju avatar, but a focused manifestation of its power. The avatar's claws swatted the meteors aside like pebbles. He reached Jelal, but instead of a punch, the avatar's giant golden hand gently carefully, enclosed the frenzied mage. Naruto, from within the avatar's head, pushed his own consciousness forward. Sage art. Psyche purge. He entered Jalal's mind. He found the terrified boy, chained in a prison of his own guilt, while the heretic, a great shadowy parasite, fed on his despair. Naruto didn't fight the heretic with force. He brought the light of his own soul, the warmth of his connections. The unwavering belief Erza had in the boy Jalal once was. He became a sun in that dark mindscape. The heretic shrieked, unable to withstand the raw, positive emotional energy. It was like trying to hold back the dawn. The parasite was burned away, purged from Jalal's soul, its connection to this plane severed. Jalal collapsed, the immense power leaving him, his body falling through the air. Naruto's avatar caught him gently and lowered him to the deck of the tower, where Erza and the others were waiting. The tower, its power source gone, began to crumble. The R system, unstable from the influx of energy, was going critical. It was going to explode, taking the whole island with it. Natsu, in a desperate, brilliant move, began eating the Etherian-infused lacrima, gaining a massive power boost. But it wasn't enough to stop the chain reaction. Erza, seeing the inevitable, made another choice. She flew to the core, intending to merge with it again, to guide the explosion upward and away from her friends. It was the same choice she had made moments before. A sacrifice. But as she reached the core, Natsu, his body glowing with dragon force, punched her out of the way, taking her place. You're not dying for us, Erza. We're fairy tale. We live for our friends. But just as he was about to be consumed, a golden chakra arm wrapped around his waist and yanked him back. Naruto stood there, his Biju mode flickering, his body strained from the psychic battle and the Etherian negation. He's right, Naruto said, a tired but determined smile on his face. We live for our friends. Which is why none of us are dying today. He turned to the unstable, exploding core. He couldn't negate this much raw power. He couldn't absorb it, so he would seal it. He flew into the heart of the exploding energy, his hands flashing through a series of hand signs so complex they blurred. An intricate seal, a spiral of unimaginable complexity based on the Uzumaki clan's ultimate Fuinjutsu. The Reaper Death Seal, but modified with his 6 paths power, spread from his body. 8 trigrams adamantine sealing chain. Golden chains erupted from his body, wrapping around the exploding core, compressing the cataclysmic energy, forcing it back in on itself. But the strain was immense. It was like trying to put a god back in a bottle. His chakra cloak shattered. Blood poured from his nose and mouth. He was pouring his own life force into the seal. The explosion was contained. The tower was saved. But the cost was steep. Naruto fell from the sky, his body broken and limp. His chakra utterly depleted. He landed in the water, sinking like a stone. Erza screamed his name and dived in after him without a moment's hesitation. She found him floating in the deep, his eyes closed, not breathing. She pulled him to the surface, her heart a block of ice in her chest. They got him to the shore, where Lucy and the others were waiting. He was pale, his skin cold. There was no pulse. No, Lucy whispered, tears streaming down her face. He can't be, he can't. Erza began desperately administering CPR, tears of her own mixing with the saltwater on his face. Don't you dare die, she sobbed, pounding on his chest. Don't you dare leave us. After everything, after you promised. I love you, Naruto. The confession, raw and desperate, hung in the air. And in his mindscape, Naruto was floating in a vast, empty darkness. His connection to Kurama was faint, a distant ember. He was tired, so tired. It would be so easy to just let go. You will do no such thing. Kurama's voice was a weak growl. But it was there. Then, another light appeared. 3 lights. A brilliant scarlet, like a defiant sunrise. A gentle, steady gold, like the light of a star. A radiant, pure white, like the heart of a flame. They were the echoes of the women who loved him. Erza's desperate confession. Lucis' unwavering hope. Mirajane's steadfast belief. A bond that stretched across the miles back to the guild. Their feelings, their love, became a lifeline. A rope thrown into the abyss. He grabbed onto it. On the beach, a faint golden glow enveloped his body. A breath shuddered through his lungs. His eyes fluttered open. They were all crying, laughing, holding on to him. Erza, Lucy, Natsu, Gray, all of them. He was alive. Later, on a quiet stretch of beach far from the ruined tower, as the sun began to set, the four of them sat together. The air was thick with unspoken words. Erza's confession echoed between them. She finally broke the silence, her face flushed, refusing to meet his eyes. "What I said, back there. I heard you," Naruto said softly. He looked at her, his expression serious. "And I feel the same." Erza's head snapped up, her eyes wide. Before she could speak, Lucy, her own eyes filled with tears, spoke up. "I do too, Naruto. When I'm with you, I feel like I can do anything. You don't just protect me. You make me stronger. I love you." The second confession was just as powerful as the first. The air grew even thicker. This was the precipice, the moment where everything could become a tangle of jealousy and heartbreak. But then, an unexpected voice joined them. A projection of Mirajane, created by a communication lacrima, shimmered into existence beside them. Her expression was soft, her smile knowing. "I know I'm not there," she said, her voice gentle. "But my feelings are the same. From the moment I met you, Naruto, I felt a connection. I saw the kindness behind the immense power. I saw the loneliness you tried to hide. I love you, too." 3 confessions. 3 pure, honest declarations of love, all laid bare under the setting sun. Naruto was speechless. He looked at the 3 of them. At Erza, strong and proud. At Lucy, bright and earnest. At Mirajane, gentle and wise. He loved them all. Each of them filled a different empty space in his soul. How could he possibly choose? It was Lucy, her heart open and her logic born from the unconventional family of fairy tale. Who dared to voice the impossible? "In our guild, family isn't defined by normal rules," she repeated the words she had spoken on the roof, her voice stronger this time, more certain. "Why should love be any different? I love you, Naruto. But Erza, Mira, I love you guys, too. You're my sisters. The idea of you being hurt by this, it hurts me more than the thought of losing him." Erza looked at Lucy, then at Mira's projection, and a slow, dawning realization spread across her face. She had spent her life fighting for her friends. The idea of fighting against them for one person's affection felt wrong. It felt contrary to everything fairy tale stood for. "Our bonds are our greatest strength," Erza said, her voice thick with emotion. "I will not allow them to be broken. Not by anything." Mirajane's smile was watery, but bright. "Our hearts are big enough. If Naruto's is, too." All eyes turned to him. Naruto, the boy who had craved family more than anything, who had clawed his way out of loneliness through sheer force of will, looked at the 3 incredible women offering him not a choice, but a union. A partnership. A new kind of family, forged in battle and sealed by love. His answer was simple. He reached out, taking Lucy's hand in his. With his other hand, he took Erza's. He looked at Mirajane's shimmering form and gave a nod, a silent promise that she was just as present. Just as important. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. It was joy, and relief, and a profound sense of coming home that was so absolute it made his soul ache. They weren't a boy and his harem. They were a team, a partnership of 4 hearts, bound together by respect, trust, and a love that defied convention. They were a new family, standing together on the shores of a world he had fallen into, under a sky full of promise. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Symphony of Ruin. Returning to the guild was a triumph. The news of the Tower of Heaven, of Jalal's defeat and redemption, and of the Magic Council's folly had spread like wildfire. Jalal, at Naruto's insistence, had turned himself in, not as a villain, but as a man seeking to atone. A move that sent shockwaves through the political landscape. The council members who voted to fire Etherian were disgraced and removed, replaced by a new body that was far more wary of unchecked power. But within the walls of fairy tale, the victory was secondary to a more seismic, albeit quieter, shift. Naruto, Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy were now a unit. It wasn't announced. There was no grand declaration. It was simply a fact, as solid and real as the guild hall itself. They moved together, a constellation of 4 stars. When Naruto trained, Erza would be there, their sparring session. A breathtaking dance of steel and taijutsu. Lucy would sit nearby, writing in her novel, occasionally looking up to offer a suggestion or a cheer. Mirajane would bring them drinks, her presence a calm, steadying warmth that bound them all together. Their combined magical and chakra signatures were a spectacle. When they entered a room, it was like a symphony tuning itself. Erza's immense, lined magical power was the string section, sharp and precise. Mirajane's demonic energy was the deep, resonant bass, a sleeping beast beneath the melody. Lucy's celestial magic was the woodwinds, bright and full of starlight. And Naruto was the entire orchestra and the conductor. His chakra was an endless ocean of life energy that harmonized with them, amplified them, and enveloped them in a protective aura. Not everyone understood. Natsu found it confusing. "So, are you guys, like, a super team now?" he'd asked, scratching his head. Gray had just shaken his head. "Don't try to figure it out, Pyro. You'll sprain something." Quote, but the guild, in its infinite, chaotic wisdom, accepted it. It was weird. It was unconventional. It was, therefore, perfectly fairy tale. Their first test as a unit came in the form of a summons. A coalition of guilds, Fairy Tail, Lamia Scale, Blue Pegasus, and Kate Shelter, was being formed to combat a new, looming threat. The Oración Cease, one of the three most powerful dark guilds in the Balam Alliance, was on the move. The meeting point was a secluded villa owned by the master of Blue Pegasus. Team Natsu was chosen to represent Fairy Tail, but it was an unspoken understanding that the guild's true leadership for this mission would be Naruto's quad. They traveled together, their synergy already unnerving to the other guilds upon their arrival. The Blue Pegasus contingent was flamboyant. Ichiya Vandale Kotobuki, a short, stout man with an absurd face and a love for perfume, led them, flanked by his trio of handsome acolytes, the Trimons. Lamia Scale was more grounded. Led by the stoic Juranikis, one of the 10 wizard saints, and a surprisingly mature and focused Leon Vascha, now a formal member and clearly on his own path to redemption. But it was the representative from Kate Shelter who drew Naruto's attention. A small, blue-haired girl named Wendy Marvell, accompanied by a white cat named Carla. Her magic felt pure, clean, and dedicated to healing. But beneath it, Naruto's sage mode detected a profound, ethereal emptiness, as if she were not entirely real. He saw a kindred loneliness in her eyes and made a mental note to be gentle with her. The meeting was tense. The plan was to launch a preemptive strike against the 6 generals of the Oración Cease. Their goal was a mystery, but their target was believed to be an ancient, powerful magic known as Nirvana. Nirvana, Ichiya announced dramatically, striking a pose, is a legendary magic that can swap light and darkness. A person of light will be consumed by shadow, and a wicked heart will be purified. They seek to turn all that is good into evil, Jura intoned, his voice grave. Naruto's eyes narrowed. That sounded exactly like the kind of chaos the heretic would have relished. He shared a look with his partners. This was their fight. The plan was to attack at once, a swift, decisive strike. But the Oración Cease were one step ahead. They attacked first. The forest around the villa exploded. A man with a snake-like appearance, Cobra, appeared, his poisonous reptile Cubelios perched on his shoulder. A woman with angelic wings, Angel, descended from the sky. A hulking brute named Racer moved at impossible speeds. Hotai, a man who spoke of love and money, warped the very ground. And a grim reaper-like figure named Midnight remained asleep on a flying carpet. His mere presence radiating a terrifying power. Their leader, a tall man with a staff named Brain, surveyed the allied mages with a contemptuous smirk. "Fools, you thought you could challenge us. You were merely gnats to be swatted." The battle was instant and brutal. Erza was the first to act, re-equipping into her Heaven's Wheel armor and launching 100 swords at Cobra. But he simply smiled. "I can hear you," Cobra said. His head tilted. "I can hear your thoughts. Your muscles tensing. The swish of your blade before you even swing it. I know your every move." He dodged her attack with serpentine grace and struck back. His poison-tipped claws narrowly missing her. Gray and Leon engaged Racer, their ice magic proving too slow to catch the speedster. Lucy and Hibiki from Blue Pegasus W. Air locked in a battle of wits against Angel, whose celestial spirit magic was a dark mirror of Lucy's own. Naruto moved to intercept Brain, but a new figure appeared before him, blocking his path. He was tall and broad-shouldered, clad in stark, featureless black armor that seemed to absorb the light. He carried no weapon. He radiated no killing intent. In fact, he radiated nothing at all. To Naruto's sage mode, he was a perfect void. A hole in the fabric of the world. The primary anomaly, the figure said, his voice a flat, toneless baritone that emanated from his helmet. My designation is the Executioner. My purpose is the termination of aberrant existences that threaten the Great Silence. This was the third herald. Not a scholar, not a manipulator. A soldier. Brain is a temporary asset, the Executioner stated. His voice devoid of any emotion. His pursuit of nirvana is a useful catalyst for chaos. But my primary mission is you. Naruto didn't waste time with words. He charged, a Rasengan already forming in his hand. He was faster, stronger, and more experienced than any opponent he had faced in this world. This should have been over in an instant. He swung, and his Rasengan fizzled out. Naruto stumbled, shock flickering across his face. The swirling ball of chakra in his hand had simply vanished. He felt a sudden, terrifying emptiness, as if a tap had been turned off inside him. His connection to Kurama, to his own chakra reserves, flickered like a dying candle. The Executioner's fist, clad in black metal, slammed into his stomach. The blow was brutally powerful, sending Naruto skidding back across the forest floor, gasping for air. It wasn't just the physical impact, it was the lingering wrongness. My ability is nullification, the Executioner explained, his tone that of a teacher explaining a simple concept. My presence, my attacks, sever the connection between a living being and their energy source. Mages find their magic gone. You find your chakra inaccessible. Against me, you are merely a mortal man. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, his mind racing. He could feel it. His chakra pathways were still there, but they were dormant. Sealed. The herald's passive aura was like a jamming signal, preventing him from drawing on his power. Kurama's voice was a frantic roar in his head, but it was distant, muffled. Kit, I can't reach you. It's like a wall of static. The Executioner advanced, his movements calm and deliberate. Your threat level has been downgraded from cosmic to negligible. Prepare for termination. He lunged, but he never reached Naruto. A wall of shimmering swords materialized between them, impacting the Executioner's armor with a screech of tortured metal. They didn't pierce it, but they knocked him back a step. Erza landed in front of Naruto, her jaw set, her eyes blazing with protective fury. Get away from him, she commanded. Almost simultaneously, a blast of purple demonic energy shot from the flank, slamming into the Executioner's side. It didn't injure him, but it staggered him. Mirajane, now in her full Satan soul, Halphus form, hovered in the air, her expression a mask of cold rage. From the other side, a golden whip of stellar energy wrapped around the Executioner's leg, trying to pull him off balance. Lucy stood there, her star dress active, her face a picture of fierce determination. You're not touching him, the three of them said, their voices a unified chorus of absolute defiance. The Executioner paused, tilting his helmeted head as he surveyed them. His guardians, your emotional attachment is a tactical flaw. You cannot defeat me. My armor is forged from a material that negates all forms of energy. We're fairy tale, Erza shot back, reequipping into her heavy adamantine armor. Quote, we don't believe in the word impossible. What followed was a masterclass in desperation and teamwork. Naruto, for the first time in his life since he was a genin, was the one who needed protecting. He was effectively a highly skilled but ultimately powerless martial artist against a being that could shrug off S-class magic. His partners became his shield and his sword. Erza was the unbreakable wall. She put herself between Naruto and the Executioner, her armor changing with breathtaking speed. Adamantine armor to block a direct blow, Flame Empress to absorb a wave of nullifying energy that seemed to emanate from the Herald's palms, Sea Empress to counter a ground-based shockwave. She was a fortress, her body a living barrier. Mirajane was the storm. She used her demonic speed and power. Not to land a decisive blow, she knew that was impossible, but to harass and harry. She was a blur of blue and white, firing blasts of demonic energy, executing lightning-fast strikes, forcing the executioner to constantly adjust. To divert his attention from his primary target. She was the perfect distraction, a beautiful angel of destruction buying them precious seconds. Lucy was the strategist. She saw that direct attacks were futile. So she changed the battlefield. Open, Gate of the Twins. Gemini, she cried. The two small spirits appeared. Copy Naruto. Now, an exact duplicate of the powerless Naruto appeared. Go, Lucy commanded. The Gemini Naruto ran in the opposite direction, a perfect decoy that drew the executioner's attention for a crucial moment. In that moment, Lucy summoned Scorpio. Sand Buster. A massive sandstorm erupted, engulfing the area, obscuring vision and creating chaos. Under the cover of the storm, she used her fluve detoils to create tripwires to alter the terrain. To turn the forest into a labyrinth of traps. She wasn't fighting the enemy, she was fighting the battlefield itself. Naruto watched, a strange mix of frustration and profound pride swelling in his chest. He was helpless, yet he had never felt more protected. He saw their desperation, their fear, but also their unwavering resolve. They were fighting for him, with a ferocity that humbled him. But the executioner was relentless. He adapted. He ignored Mirajane's attacks, tanking them with his armor. He smashed through Erza's defenses with sheer, brute force, cracking her adamantine shield. He navigated Lucy's sandstorm with an unnatural sense of direction, the nullification aura dissipating the magical sand around him. He cornered them. Naruto was behind the three of them, still struggling to reignite his chakra. The executioner raised his hand, a concentrated wave of pure nullification energy gathering in his palm. It was a kill shot, aimed directly at Naruto. Your interference ends now, the executioner declared. Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy saw the attack coming. There was no time to dodge, no time to counter. In a single, unified moment of pure, selfless instinct, they moved as one. Erza slammed the remains of her adamantine shield into the ground in front of Naruto. Mirajane flew in front of the shield, her arms outstretched, unleashing every ounce of her demonic power in a continuous, desperate beam. Lucy stood beside her, her own star dress flaring as she poured her celestial energy into Myra's blast, reinforcing it, giving it substance. They created a combined shield of armor, demonic fury, and starlight, a testament to three different kinds of power, united by one purpose. The executioner's nullification wave struck their shield. The impact was silent but absolute. The world went white. The very air seemed to thin. Their combined shield buckled, cracked, and then shattered in a brilliant explosion of light and power. The three women were thrown back, crashing to the ground. Wounded and smoking, their magic utterly depleted. But they had done it. They had blocked the attack. They had shielded him. They lay in a heap at his feet, bruised and gasping. But they had bought him the time he needed. Naruto stared down at them, at the sacrifices they had just made for him. Erza's broken armor, Mirajane's fading Satan soul, Lucy's tattered star dress, and something inside him, a core of unshakable resolve, ignited. He wasn't just a guest in this world anymore. He wasn't just their protector. He was their partner, and they had just fought and bled for him. His frustration vanished, replaced by a cold, clear focus. He couldn't use his own chakra. Fine. Then he would borrow it. He dropped into a low stance, his hands pressed together. He closed his eyes, ignoring the executioner who was now striding toward him for the final blow. He reached out, not inward, but outward. He reached for the world itself. Kurama, he thought, his voice now clear and sharp in the mindscape. The static from the nullification field still present, but no longer overwhelming. His field blocks internal energy. But it can't block the entire planet. Sage mode, the fox growled. A feral grin spreading across his massive face. Let the world fight for you, Kit. Naruto drew in a deep breath. He pulled on the life energy of the ancient forest, the rich soil, the clean air. Nature energy, raw and untamed, flooded into him. It didn't flow through his chakra pathways. It saturated his very cells, a different kind of power, a different circuit. The executioner paused, 5 feet away. He felt the shift. The air around the blond man grew heavy, dense with an energy that his nullification field couldn't seem to affect. It wasn't magic. It wasn't the chakra he had suppressed. It was something more primal. Naruto's eyes snapped open. They were no longer blue. They were a brilliant gold, with the horizontal toad-like pupils of a perfect sage. Orange pigment flared into existence around his eyes. He hadn't just activated Sage Mode. He had become a vessel for the planet's raw power. "My turn," he said, his voice a low harmony of his own and the rumbling earth. He didn't move with the blinding speed of his chakra-enhanced state. He moved with the inexorable force of an avalanche. He met the executioner's charge, and this time, when their fists met, it was the herald's black armor that dented with a loud crack. The executioner stumbled back, genuine surprise in his toneless voice. "Impossible. This energy signature, it's not yours. It belongs to everyone," Naruto grunted, pressing the attack. He still couldn't form a Rasengan. That required his own chakra as a catalyst. But he could do other things. He could channel the raw nature energy. He slammed his palm into the ground. Sage art. Erupting earth spikes. Massive pillars of rock, infused with nature energy that resisted the nullification, erupted from the ground, forcing the executioner onto the defensive. This was his chance. The Herald's field was designed to nullify an individual's connection to their power. But it wasn't absolute. By flooding the immediate area with raw nature energy, Naruto was creating interference. A disruptive field of his own that caused the nullification aura to flicker and weaken. He saw the opening, a split second where the suppression around his own chakra network wavered. It was all he needed. He flashed through hand signs, gathering the tiniest spark of his own chakra and a massive amount of the nature energy he had accumulated. He fused them with of the most volatile elemental transformations he possessed, a gift from the Four Tails, Son Goku. Lava, a swirling sphere of molten rock and boiling energy formed in his hand. It wasn't a perfect Rasenshuriken, but it was close. Sage art. Lava-style Rasenshuriken. He threw it. The spinning vortex of magma flew through the air, and the executioner, for the first time, felt a genuine threat. He raised his arms to block, his nullification field flaring to its maximum. The lava Rasenshuriken struck his armor. The nullification field shredded the wind nature of the attack, but it couldn't negate the sheer, overwhelming physical properties of the lava. The molten rock clung to the Herald's armor, melting through the negation-forged metal. The heat was immense, a miniature sun exploding on his chest. The executioner let out a strangled, inhuman cry, not of pain, but of system failure. His armor glowed cherry red, then white hot, his nullification field collapsing completely. He crashed to the ground, smoke pouring from his body, twitching and spasming. He was not dead, but his armor, the source of his power, was ruined. He was neutralized. Panting, Naruto let Sage Mode fade, the power receding, leaving him exhausted but victorious. He stumbled over to his partners, who were slowly, painfully picking themselves up. He knelt before them, his expression a mixture of awe, gratitude, and overwhelming love. I'm used to being the one who protects everyone," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out, his hand hovering, not sure who to touch first. Thank you." Lucy, despite her injuries, managed a weak smile and rested her head against his shoulder. Erza, wincing, leaned against his other side. Mirajane, her Satan soul form completely gone, simply leaned against his back, her breathing ragged. They formed a small, exhausted, triumphant circle. "That's what family does," Mirajane whispered, her voice barely audible. "We protect each other." The rest of the Oración cease. Their leader Brain included, were defeated by the combined efforts of the other allied mages, with Natsu landing the final, decisive blow against the awakened Zero personality. Nirvana was activated, but its light-to-dark conversion was thwarted, and in the end, it was destroyed. The allied forces were victorious. The captured executioner, now powerless, was taken into custody by the reformed Magic Council, a living, breathing herald for them to study. A priceless piece of intelligence in a war they were only just beginning to understand. As the sun set, Naruto and his wives sat by a crackling campfire. Their injuries bandaged, their bodies aching, but their spirits unbroken. He looked at them, Erza, staring into the flames, her usual stoicism softened by a quiet contentment, Lucy, already scribbling in her notebook. A determined smile on her face, and Mirajane, humming a soft tune as she tended to a cut on his arm. They had faced his most difficult opponent yet, a foe designed to be his perfect counter. And they had won, not because of his power, but because of theirs. Because they had shielded him when he was weak. They had stood as his living armor, his avenging angels, his brilliant strategists. He was the savior of a world, a demigod of unimaginable power. But in that moment, he was just a man, deeply and irrevocably in love with the three incredible women who had just saved his life. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that he would gladly burn down the heavens for them. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Tenro Tree's Last Stand. 7 years. In the grand, cosmic scale of things, it was less than the blink of an eye. For the world of Fury, it was an era defined by a void. An era where the heart of the world's most powerful guild had been ripped out, leaving behind a hollow echo of laughter and a legacy that was slowly fading into myth. But for Naruto Uzumaki, it was an eternity spent in a silent, golden twilight. He floated in a sea of non-existence. A space between seconds. Mavis Vermilion's ultimate defensive magic, Fairy Sphere, had saved them. It had encased Tenro Island in a crystal of frozen time, shielding them from the apocalyptic roar of Acnologia's attack. But Naruto had been at the epicenter of a different, far greater cataclysm. His battle with the Regent of Silence had been a war against a concept. The Regent was not a person. It was a walking, sentient piece of the Great Silence, Anksaram's will made manifest. Its mere presence was an anti-genesis, unmaking the very laws of reality. Magic failed, life withered, hope died. Naruto had met this absolute negation not with negation, but with an overwhelming affirmation of life. He had fused with Kurama, drawn on the life force of the entire Tenro tree, and channeled the raw emotional power of his family's bonds into a sun of golden chakra. He hadn't fought the Regent. He had outshone it. He had known he couldn't destroy a piece of the void. So he had done the next best thing. He had woven the most complex seal of his life, a fusion of Uzumaki Fuinjutsu and Six Paths Sage Art, and had not killed the Regent, but banished it, casting T into a pocket dimension outside of time, a prison of eternal nothingness for a being who craved it. The cost was absolute. The effort had shattered his chakra network, broken his body, and very nearly extinguished his soul. As Mavis's spell had descended, he was dying. But he was not alone. In the timeless amber of the fairy sphere, their ethereal forms had stayed with him. Erza, Mirajane, Lucy, they had become his life support. Their love, their life force, their unwavering belief in him had woven itself into his shattered spirit, a constant, gentle current that refused to let him fade. Why were the anchor that kept his soul from drifting away into the silent dark. For 7 years, they had sustained him, their intertwined consciousnesses a silent vigil in the heart of the crystal. When the spell finally broke, it was like the world taking its first breath after an age of being submerged. The members of Blue Pegasus who found them stared in disbelief. There they were, the lost children of fairy tale, untouched by time, sleeping peacefully on the grass of Tenro Island as if they had only been there for a night. Natsu was the first to stir, then Gray, then the others. They were confused, disoriented. Their last memory the terrifying black dragon and a blinding golden light. But Naruto's awakening was different. He sat up, and the world shifted. The very air around him seemed to hum with a newfound clarity. The 7 years of being bathed in Mavis's magic and sustained by the pure life force of his wives had not just healed him. It had changed him. His connection to nature, energy was no longer something he had to actively seek. It was a part of him, as natural as breathing. His control over his own chakra was absolute, every pathway reinforced, every cell saturated with power. He was calmer, clearer. His sage mode a passive state he could enter and exit with a mere thought. He looked at his hands. The power felt complete, whole. He looked up and saw them. Erza was staring at her own hands, a look of profound shock on her face. Lucy was looking at her gate keys, which were glowing with a faint, warm light. Mirajane simply had her eyes closed, a small, serene smile on her face. They felt it too. Their connection to him, that constant flow of energy over 7 years, had deepened their own magical reserves, harmonizing their power with his on a fundamental level. What What happened? Lucy asked, her voice trembling. A small, ethereal figure appeared before them. Mavis Vermilion, the first master of Fairy Tail. You have been asleep for 7 years, she announced. Her expression a mixture of awe and relief. She looked at Naruto. And you saved us all. You faced a power beyond even acknowledge. A god. The truth settled on them, heavy and unbelievable. 7 years. Their home, their friends, their world had moved on without them. The journey back was a somber one. They found their guild hall, once the proudest building in Magnolia, reduced to a rundown second-rate bar on the edge of town. They found their remaining guildmates, older, wearier, crushed by debt and ridicule, but their spirit, their love for their family, unbroken. The reunion was a storm of tears and laughter. The return of the Tenro team was a miracle, a spark of hope in the darkness. Seeing their family so diminished, so hurt, ignited a fire in all of them. And it was Naruto, the quiet pillar of their group, who fanned the flames. This isn't the fairy tale I joined, he said, his voice quiet but ringing through the small, shabby bar. He looked at the haggard faces of Mikao and Wakaba, at Romeo. Now a young man. The fairy tale I know is the strongest, proudest, most chaotic guild in the world. And it will be again. His words were a promise. His presence was a catalyst. With the return of their strongest members, the sleeping giant of Fairy Tail began to stir. Their first step was to reclaim their honor. The Grand Magic Games, an annual tournament to determine the strongest guild in Fury, was just around the corner. It was the perfect stage. The training was intense, but for Naruto, Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy, it was more about synchronization than power-ups. They already had the power. Now, they learned to wield it as one. One afternoon, they trained in the woods outside of town. Erza, in her flight armor, moved with blinding speed, her blades a silver torrent. But Naruto, without even entering his Biju mode, parried her every strike with a single kunai, his movements a sublime example of perfected taijutsu. He wasn't just reacting, he was anticipating. His sage senses and their deep connection telling him what she would do before she even did it. You're faster, she panted, landing gracefully, a grin on her face. Your body has fully adapted to your sage abilities. And you're stronger, he replied, nodding to her sword. I can feel it. Our time in the sphere, it linked us. Your magic feels like an extension of my own chakra. Lucy, determined to pull her own weight, pushed herself to her limits. Open, Gate of the Lion. Gate of the Ram. Loke, Ares, she commanded, attempting a two-spirit summon, a feat that once would have exhausted her. Now, she felt a steady, warm flow of energy from Naruto, a background hum that sustained her own magic. Loke and Ares appeared, solid and powerful. Incredible, Lucy, Loke said, adjusting his glasses. Your magical power has increased exponentially. Mirajane's transformation was the most terrifying. She entered her Satan soul, Cetri form, a creature of devastating power and grace. But the demonic energy was no longer wild and feral. It was controlled, focused, honed to a razor's edge. She moved, and the very air seemed to bend to her will. The demonic power no longer feels like a separate entity. She explained to Naruto later, her form reverted, her expression serene. It feels like me. The connection we shared, it purified the hatred, leaving only the strength. They were no longer just 4 powerful individuals. They were a single entity with 4 bodies, their powers and thoughts intertwined. They were ready. The Grand Magic Games were a spectacle, and Fairy Tail's return was the main event. They were jeered, mocked as has-beens from a forgotten era. Their new team, Natsu, Gray, Erza, Lucy, and Elfman, entered the arena to a chorus of boos. Naruto had declined to be an official participant. This is for Fairy Tail to reclaim its name, he had told Makarov. I'll be your trump card, if you need one. He sat in the stands with Mirajane, a silent, imposing PR essence that made the other guilds nervous. The games began, and Fairy Tail dominated. Gray defeated his rival from Sabertooth, the current #1 guild. Elfman, in a stunning upset, took down Bacchus, one of the strongest mages in Fury. Lucy, using her newfound power to summon 3 spirits at once, fought brilliantly, only losing due to a cunning trap laid by Raven Tail, a dark guild masquerading as a legitimate one. But it was Erza's event that silenced the world. The Pandemonium event. A challenge to face 100 monsters of increasing difficulty. The other contestants chose to fight a handful each. Erza, with a calm, unshakable confidence, stepped forward and chose to fight all 100. She stood alone in the arena against a horde of monstrous beasts. And she became a goddess of war. She didn't just fight them. She danced through them. Her equip was a blur, armor and weapons changing in the blink of an eye. She was a whirlwind of steel and righteous fury. It was a display of such overwhelming power and skill that the entire stadium, which had been jeering her moments before, fell into a stunned, reverent silence. She defeated the 99th monster and stood before the final, S-class beast. Panting but unbroken, it was then that Naruto, from the stands, subtly channeled a thread of his own pure sage energy into her. A gift, a boost. Erza felt the warm, familiar power flow into her, replenishing her reserves, sharpening her senses. She looked up at the stands and met his gaze. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. She turned back to the S-class monster, raised her sword, and with a final, triumphant roar, ended the battle. The stadium erupted. The name, Titania, was no longer a memory. It was a living legend, reborn. The games were a triumph. Fairy tale, through grit, determination, and a few displays of absolutely terrifying power, reclaimed their spot as the #1 guild in Fury. Their victory was a message to the entire world. But it was also a beacon. A beacon that shone into the darkest corners of the cosmos, right to the senses of a being of absolute order. The celebration in the capital city of Crocus was euphoric. That night, a grand ball was held for the victorious mages. It was a night of joy, of relief, of a future that finally seemed bright again. Naruto stood on a balcony overlooking the city, the sounds of the party a distant murmur. He wore a simple black formal suit that Mirajane had insisted he buy, and he felt awkward and out of place. He watched the lights of the city, but his senses were stretched thin, scanning the horizon. Always waiting for the other shoe to drop. A hero's work is never done, is it? He turned. Erza stood there, stunning in a deep blue evening gown, her scarlet hair pinned up. Lucy was beside her in a shimmering pink dress, a radiant smile on her face. Mirajane, elegant in a simple but form-fitting black dress, completed the trio. They had come to find him. You're always watching, Erza said softly, coming to stand beside him. Even now, a habit, he admitted. You should try to enjoy the peace, Naruto, Lucy said, taking his hand. We earned it. She's right, Mirajane added, her hand resting on his shoulder. Tonight is for us. He looked at them, at their beauty, their strength, the love shining in their eyes. And for a moment, he let his guard down. He allowed himself to just be there, with them. In that perfect, peaceful moment. He smiled, a real, genuine smile, and leaned in, his lips about to meet Erza's. And that's when the sky went black. Not like a cloud covering the moon. It was as if the stars themselves had been extinguished. A shadow fell over the entire city, a profound, chilling darkness that swallowed all light. The music in the ballroom died. The cheerful chatter turned to panicked screams. A wave of palpable dread washed over the capital, so potent that weaker mages collapsed, clutching their chests. It was an energy of absolute finality. The energy of a tomb. Naruto and his partners were on their feet in an instant, their formal wear feeling like a mockery in the face of this cosmic horror. What is this? Lucy cried, her body trembling. It's not a herald, Naruto said, his voice grim, his body already glowing with a faint golden light. He could feel it. This wasn't an agent. This was the source. This is him. In the center of the city. In the plaza before the royal palace, the darkness coalesced. It did not form a monster. It did not form a man. It formed a throne of black, light-devouring material, upon which sat a single, silent figure. Anksarum. He looked deceptively simple, a being in a simple robe, his face obscured by a deep hood from which no features could be seen, only 2 points of cold, white light, like distant, dead stars. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply was, and his presence was anathema to life itself. Flowers in the royal gardens withered to dust. The water in the fountains turned black and still. The very air grew thin and cold, and people gasped for a breath that held no life. From the other side of the continent, a roar of pure, instinctual fury echoed. Acknowledge, the black dragon of the apocalypse. The self-proclaimed Dragon King felt this divine intrusion into his world, and his rage was absolute. He took to the sky, a black speck moving at impossible speeds toward Crocus. Zirf, the immortal black wizard, who had been watching the games from the shadows, felt his curse flare in response to his god's presence. The contradiction of his existence, the curse of Anksaram, pulsed with agonizing pain. He clutched his head, a silent scream on his lips. This was the being responsible for his eternal suffering. The strongest mages of Fury gathered in the plaza. The new magic council, the guild masters, the wizard saints, Jura, Makarov, guildarts. They all stood before the silent god, their own immense power feeling like a flickering candle in a hurricane. Be gone from our world, Dark One. Jura yelled, slamming his hands on the ground. A massive pillar of earth erupted toward the throne. It crumbled to dust a dozen feet from its target, its magic simply ceasing to exist. Anksaram did not move, he merely tilted his head, and the wizard Saint Juranikis was erased. There was no flash of light, no scream. One moment he was there, a bastion of strength and order, and the next. He was gone, not dead, unwritten from existence, wiped from the page of reality. Panic turned to abject terror. This was not a foe to be fought. This was an extinction-level event. Just then, Acknowledge arrived. He descended from the sky like a black meteor, his rage a physical force. This world is mine to destroy, he bellowed, and unleashed his ultimate attack, a torrent of pure apocalyptic magic. Directly at the silent god on the throne. The beam, powerful enough to obliterate an island, washed over the throne. For a moment, there was only blinding light. When it faded, Anksaram was still there. Unmoved, untouched. He raised one slender, pale hand from beneath his robe. He pointed a single finger at the Dragon King. Acknowledge, the invincible dragon who had bathed in the blood of his kin. Who feared nothing, felt a sensation he had not felt in 400 years, fear. A thin beam of white light, no thicker than a thread, shot from Anksaram's finger and struck the dragon in the chest. Acknowledge let out a sound that was not a roar, but a squeal of pure agony. The scales on his chest, harder than any known material, cracked and shattered. He tumbled from the sky, crashing into the arena of the Grand Magic Games, grievously wounded, a massive, smoking hole in his chest. The message was clear. The strongest beings of this world were nothing. It was into this terrified silence that Naruto and his partners arrived. They landed in the plaza, a beacon of defiant light in the oppressive darkness. Naruto was now fully cloaked in his Six Paths Sage mode. A sun god against the encroaching night. Erza was in her Armadura fairy armor. Mirajane was in her full Satan soul, Cetri form. Lucy was radiant in her star dress, her keys glowing, Loken Virgo already standing beside her. Their expressions grim. Anksaram's gaze, the 2 points of cold, white light, shifted to them. To him, the nexus of worlds, a voice echoed, not in their ears, but in every mind in the city. It was a voice of cold, perfect logic, like a thinking machine contemplating an error in its calculations. The great anomaly. You have rejected my heralds. You have rejected my order. You have imprisoned a part of my will. This world is corrupted by your presence. Its chaotic energies have been amplified. The cleansing must be accelerated. Faceless, vaguely humanoid figures began to rise from the shadows around the city. They were the Silent Ones, manifestations of the void, Anksaram's foot soldiers. They carried no weapons. Their touch was their only weapon, a touch that drained magic, life, and hope. The final war had begun. Erza, Mira, Lucy. Naruto's voice was calm, cutting through the fear. Protect the people. Get them out of the city. Buy me time. They didn't hesitate. They knew a brawl was pointless. This was a battle of concepts. You're not fighting him alone, Erza declared, her resolve unshakable. I won't be, Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the god. But I'm the only one who can get close. He was right. His Six Paths Sage mode, a power born from the progenitor of chakra, a balance of spiritual and physical energy, was the only thing that seemed to resist the god's life-draining aura. The women sprang into action. Erza, a blazing star of hope, flew toward the largest group of Silent Ones, her swords a hymn of defiance. Mirajane became a demon of righteous fury, a whirlwind of destructive power that carved a path for the fleeing citizens. Lucy, with her spirits, formed a defensive perimeter around the castle, her starlight a shield against the encroaching darkness. Naruto walked forward, alone, until he stood before the throne. "You cannot defeat me," the voice of Anksaram stated, a simple fact. "I am order. I am inevitability. I am the end of all things. To fight me is to fight entropy itself. I'm not here to defeat you," Naruto said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm here to teach you." He held up his hand. A swirling ball of golden chakra formed in his palm. It wasn't a Rasengan. It was a memory, a feeling. It was the taste of Ichiraku ramen. It was the weight of Iruka's hand on his head. It was the sting of Sasuke's Chidori and the warmth of their reconciliation. It was the joy of seeing his face on the Hokage monument. He pushed that sphere of memory and emotion forward. It struck Anksaram's chest and dissipated, a single drop of rain on a boundless ocean. Anksaram tilted his head. "Irrelevant data, emotional corruption." "Then here's some more," Naruto said, and he created another. This one held the chaos of the fairy tale guild hall. The warmth of Mirajane's smile. The fierce pride in Erza's eyes. The brilliant light of Lucy's spirit. Their confessions under the starlight. The feeling of their hands in his. Ire combined love that had kept him alive for 7 years in the darkness. He pushed it forward. It too was absorbed, seemingly without effect. "Pointless," the god intoned. But Naruto didn't stop. He unleashed a torrent of them. Spheres of pure, unadulterated life. The tears of a child he had saved. The roar of a crowd at the games. The bitter taste of defeat and the sweet triumph of victory. The loyalty of a friend. The sacrifice of a teacher. The love of a family. He threw everything he was, everything he had ever been, everything he had learned and felt in 2 worlds, at the god of nothingness. He was not attacking its body. He was attacking its philosophy. He was force-feeding an infinite data stream of chaotic, beautiful, illogical emotion to a being of pure, dispassionate logic. And for the first time, Anksaram faltered. The cold white lights of his eyes flickered. Contradiction. Illogical. The value of a single existence cannot be quantified. It was a processing error. A paradox the god could not compute. Anksaram, the being of absolute order, was experiencing the chaos of feeling for the first time. In that moment of divine confusion, 2 figures appeared at Naruto's side. Zirf, his face a mask of determined agony. "He is the source of my curse. If he can falter, then perhaps my curse can have a purpose beyond suffering." And from the ruins of the arena, Acknowledge, dragging his wounded body. His eyes burning with a hateful fire. "I will not allow my world to be unmade by another. If I must ally myself with you, human, to kill a god, then so be it." Naruto looked at the Black Wizard and the Dragon King. At the 2 greatest forces of destruction in this world, now standing with him. "He's not a god we can kill," Naruto said. "But maybe, we can change him." Anksaram was beginning to recover. His aura stabilizing. They had one chance. "Zirf," Naruto commanded. "Your curse is the paradox of life and death. Don't fight it, channel it. Acknowledge, your magic is the end of all things. The dragon's apocalypse. Focus it. I will be the vessel." It was an insane plan. To channel the 2 most destructive forces on the planet through his own body, and aim them at a god. But it was their only hope. Naruto entered his full Biju avatar mode, a titanic fox of pure golden energy, Kurama roaring in triumph within him. He stood as a giant of light against the encroaching darkness. "Now," he roared. Zirf unleashed his death magic, not as a wave, but as a focused beam, pouring it into the avatar. Acknowledge unleashed his own roar, not of destruction, but of raw, draconic power. The 2 opposing forces of magic met inside Naruto's avatar, and he screamed as the paradox threatened to tear him apart. But he held it. With his 6 paths power, the ultimate balancing force, he took the contradiction of Zirf and the finality of Acknowledge and wove them together. He was no longer just a being of life. He was a being of the entire cycle. He pointed a finger at the faltering god on the throne. And he fired. The beam that shot forth was not gold, or black, or white. It was a color that had no name, a beam of pure, conceptual power. It was the concept of a balanced cycle, of life and death. Of beginnings and endings, of order and chaos, made manifest. It struck Anksaram. The god did not scream. He did not explode. He simply changed. The throne of blackness dissolved. The oppressive aura of dread vanished. The robed figure stood, and for the first time, looked up. The hood fell back to reveal a face, not of a man, but of a cosmic entity made of stars and nebulae. Its expression no longer one of cold logic, but of dawning, infinite curiosity. Balance, the voice whispered in every mind, no longer cold, but filled with a profound wonder. A new parameter. The equation is beautiful. The god of absolute order had been transformed into a true god of the cycle. Its purpose was no longer to cleanse, but to observe, to understand. The silent ones dissolved into harmless smoke. The darkness over the city receded, revealing the true, star-filled night sky. Anksaram gave a single, slow nod to Naruto, a gesture of cosmic acknowledgement. Then, he faded away, his presence withdrawing from the world. The war was over. Naruto's avatar dissolved, leaving him kneeling on the ground, panting, exhausted, but alive. He had done it. He had faced a god and taught it how to feel. A hand rested on his shoulder. He looked up to see Zirf, the deathly aura around him gone. The curse was broken. Tears streamed down the immortal wizard's face. "Thank you," he whispered. Acknowledge gave a grudging snort. He turned and, without another word, took to the sky, no longer a king of destruction, but a silent, wary guardian. Then, they were there. Erza, Mirajane, and Lucy. They surrounded him. Their faces streaked with grime and tears, their bodies bruised, but their eyes shining with a love so bright it outshone every star in the sky. He didn't need to be a god. He didn't need to be a savior. He just needed to be theirs. He had found his home, and he had saved it. And as their arms wrapped around him, he knew, with absolute certainty, that this was his dawn. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The dawn of a new era. Peace, when it finally came, was not a silent, placid thing. It was loud. It was chaotic. It was the sound of a hammer on wood, of laughter in a crowded pub, of a world rebuilding itself. Not just from the rubble of a cosmic war, but from 7 years of quiet despair. The battle against Anksaram, the night of falling stars, as the bards were already calling it, had changed everything. Gods were no longer the stuff of children's tales. The people of Fury had looked into the void and had seen their own heroes push it back. Faith was renewed, not in distant, uncaring deities, but in the strength of human bonds. Zirf, his curse finally broken, found Mavis Vermilion. Their reunion was not the tragic end their paradox once promised, but a quiet, bittersweet beginning. They chose to leave the world behind, to wander it not as ghosts of history, but as two souls finally free to find their own peace, their story at last their own. Acknowledge, humbled and changed by the confrontation, vanished into the northern mountains, the threat of his rage replaced by the legend of a silent, brooding guardian. The world could breathe again. And at the center of it all was Naruto Uzumaki. The maelstrom of fury, the man who had stared down a god and shown it the meaning of love. He was offered titles, castles, a seat on the new council. The world was his for the asking. He turned it all down. "I already have everything I need," he had told the Queen of Fury, his hand finding Erza's, his eyes finding Lucis and Mirajane's in the crowd. The years that followed were golden. Fairy Tail, restored to its rightful place, became more than just the strongest guild, it became a symbol of hope and resilience for the entire continent. The guild hall was rebuilt, larger and more chaotic than ever. The sounds of Natsu and Gajil's brawls a daily, comforting rhythm. Naruto's life settled into a pattern he had once only dreamed of. He was a husband. He was, eventually, a father. Their family was as unconventional as their courtship. There was no single house, but a shared wing of the newly built Fairy Hills dorms, always open, always filled with life. Mornings were a beautiful chaos. Naruto would wake first, a habit from a lifetime of war, and would often find one of his wives already awake with him. Sometimes it was Erza, joining him for a spar in the pre-dawn light. Their movements a silent, perfect conversation. Sometimes it was Lucy, curled up with a book and a cup of tea, her quiet presence a balm to his soul. Other times it was Mirajane, humming a soft tune in the kitchen. Her smile as warm and life-affirming as the rising sun. Their children were a reflection of their impossible union. The eldest was a boy named Minato, after the father Naruto had only briefly known. He had Naruto's unruly blonde hair and Mirajane's deep, knowing blue eyes. His magic was a strange and powerful fusion. Take over, but instead of demonic souls, he could partially or fully transform into magical beasts whose essence he had befriended, a power born of his mother's magic and his father's profound ability to connect with any living thing. He was quiet, kind, and possessed a wisdom far beyond his years. Then came the twins, a boy and a girl. Kushina, named for Naruto's fiery mother, had Erza's stunning scarlet hair and Naruto's bright, sky-blue eyes. She was a prodigy, inheriting Erza's re-equipped magic but with a unique twist. Instead of just swords and armor, she could summon and equip the very concepts of weapons Naruto had described to her from his old world: kunai that could phase through objects, senbon that could target chakra points, giant shuriken that could split into a dozen smaller blades. She was fierce, disciplined, and fiercely protective of her family. Her twin brother, Jiraiya, named for the Sannin who had been both teacher and grandfather to Naruto, was his father's mirror image in looks, complete with whisker marks on his cheeks. But his magic was all Lucy. He was a celestial wizard, but his bond with the spirits was so deep, so instinctual, that he didn't need keys. He could hear their whispers on the wind, and they would come to his aid not as summons, but as friends dropping by for a visit. He had Lucy's kind heart and Naruto's mischievous streak, a combination that kept the entire guild on its toes. Naruto was a natural father. He taught them not just jutsu and battle tactics, but the lessons he had learned the hard way. He taught Minato that true strength was gentleness. He taught Kushina that the sharpest blade is useless without a hand to guide it with purpose. He taught Jiraiya that a bond of trust is the most powerful magic of all. He would tell them stories, not of the great ninja war or the god he had faced, but of a lonely boy in an orange jumpsuit who dreamed of being acknowledged, of a knuckle-headed ninja who never gave up. His past was not a secret sorrow anymore, it was a collection of fables, lessons for his children. His wives flourished, their own legends growing alongside his. Erza Scarlet, Titania, became the 8th master of fairy tale after Makarov finally, cheerfully, retired. She led not with an iron fist, but with a strength tempered by Naruto's compassion. She was a brilliant, tactical leader in times of crisis, but in times of peace, she was a warm, if sometimes stern, matriarch to her chaotic guild family. Her love for Naruto was a bedrock of strength and respect, a partnership of two ultimate warriors who had found their peace in each other's arms. She would often watch him train their children, a soft, private smile on her face, the fierce night completely undone by the sight of her husband being a father. Lucy Heartfilia Uzumaki became the world's most celebrated author. Her debut novel, The Adventures of Iris, was a thinly veiled but beautifully written account of her early days in fairy tale. But it was her epic fantasy series, The Maelstrom and the Stars, that became a global phenomenon. It was the story of a hero falling from another world, of the knight who respected him, the demon who understood him, and the celestial mage who loved him. It was their story, a testament to their unconventional love, and it taught a generation that family and love were things you built, not things you were given. Her love for Naruto was one of a shared journey, of two people who had helped each other grow from uncertain beginners into masters of their own destiny. Mirajane Strauss, the she-devil, found a different kind of power. While she remained one of fairy tale's strongest S-class mages, her greatest influence was as a diplomat and a confidant. Her profound empathy, amplified by her bond with Naruto, gave her an almost supernatural ability to soothe conflicts and heal wounded hearts. She became an advisor to Queen Hisui, her gentle wisdom guiding the kingdom into an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity. Her love for Naruto was the deep, quiet anchor of their family. A love born of mutual understanding of the burdens they carried, a silent promise that no matter how heavy the world got, they would carry it together. Their life was not without conflict. Dark guilds rose and fell. Ancient beasts stirred, but these were no longer world-ending threats. They were simply work. And they were always handled by the combined might of fairy tale's new generation. Led by the Uzumaki children and the children of Natsu and Lizana, Gray and Juvia, and Gajil and Levi. The old team Natsu remained inseparable. Natsu, now a doting and comically overprotective father, still challenged Naruto to a fight every other day. These brawls never lasted long. They usually ended with Naruto effortlessly dodging Natsu's attacks until the Dragon Slayer tired himself out, before clapping him on the back and heading to the bar for a drink. They were brothers, rivals, and the two unshakable pillars of the guild. One crisp autumn afternoon, years later, the guild hall was at its peak chaos. The next generation of mages, now teenagers, were embroiled in a massive brawl that had already destroyed half the furniture. Kushina, her scarlet hair a whip of motion, was locked in a fierce but friendly spar with Natsu's fire-breathing daughter, her conceptual blades clashing against fists of pure flame. Jiraiya had summoned Plu, who was acting as a referee, while he and Gajil's son, a boy who could turn his limbs into solid script, placed bets on the outcome. Minato sat calmly in the middle of it all, a small, furry creature, a baby griffin he'd be. Befriended on a recent mission, asleep in his lap, a placid smile on his face as he occasionally erected a barrier of green energy to deflect a stray piece of flying table. Naruto sat at the bar, watching it all. He was older now, the lines around his eyes etched by laughter rather than sorrow. He wore a simple black shirt and pants, the garish orange of his youth long since retired. The prosthetic arm that Tsunade had eventually sent through a one-time dimensional rift created by a repentant Orochimaru was almost indistinguishable from a real one. The tech of his old world seamlessly blended with the magic of his new one. Erza sat to his left, her armor long gone, replaced by a simple dress. She leaned her head on his shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips as she watched her daughter fight with a ferocity that mirrored her own. "She has your footwork," Erza murmured, her voice soft. "But my fire." Lucy sat to his right, a new manuscript open in front of her, though she wasn't writing. She was just watching her son use his celestial spirits to cheat at cards with Gray's son. She laughed, a bright, clear sound, and rested her head on Naruto's other shoulder. "Jiraiya got your love for pranks, I'm afraid." Mirajane stood behind the bar, polishing a glass, her gaze on Minato. She saw the way he calmed the griffin, the way his presence seemed to soothe the very air around him. "And Minato has your heart," she said, her voice filled with a quiet pride. She leaned over the bar, her hand coming to rest on his, her touch as familiar and comforting as his own heartbeat. He was surrounded by them. By the family he had built, by the love that had saved him and that he had saved in turn. He looked at the chaos of the guild hall, at the smiling faces of his friends, at the bright, hopeful eyes of his children. He saw the legacy of two worlds, of ninjas and maces, of chakra and magic, all fused together in this one, beautiful, noisy room. He had fallen from his world as a hero who had just saved it, only to find himself a stranger in a land he didn't understand. He had lost everything, his home, his friends, his destiny. But in its place, he had found something more. He hadn't just found a new home. He had built one. He hadn't just found a new family. He had forged one, in the fires of battle and the quiet moments in between. He had been a lonely boy, a Jinchuriki, a savior. Now, he was a husband, a father, a friend. He was happy. Kurama, a silent, content presence who hadn't spoken in years, finally rumbled in his mind, his voice a low, gravelly purr. "You did good, Kit. You did real good." Naruto squeezed Erza's shoulder, intertwined his fingers with Lucis, and gave Mirajane's hand a gentle press. He looked at the beautiful, chaotic life he had built, at the three incredible women who were its foundation, and a profound, perfect peace settled over him. He was home. Chapter 7 End.